How are you? Pleased to meet you. Need assistance?
Hi, how are you?
Interesting.
My, you're a tall one.
Can I help you? You have a great day now.
your friend or enemy. I just want a piece of you, so I'm not too far gone. I don't want you to be something close to me. Every time I think of you, I get too fucked up. But I've been through this twice, and now I've made my mind. 'Cause you've been on my mind. 'Cause you're changing, and I just don't know the side of you changing. And I don't know how to talk to you, 'cause you've been so cold right now, 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 now. Because you're changing, and I just don't know the side of you changing. And I don't know how to talk to you, 'cause you've been so cold right now, now, now. I don't wanna be what you said. I don't want you inside my head. And all I've tried is hear you say, Lily, I can't get this through my head. Yeah, can't get this through my head. Why you've been so empty and full of regrets. I don't wanna talk, I cannot text. Would you be with someone else instead? I can take it, I've been so in love, but I can't just mistake it. I've been driving far, but I can't really fake it. Is it really worth when you lose it? Yeah. 'Cause you're changing, and I just don't know the side of you changing. And I don't know how to talk to you, 'cause you've been so cold right now, 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 now. Because you're changing, and I just don't know the side of you changing. And I don't know how to talk to you, 'cause you've been so cold right now, now, now. And I don't wanna try, 'cause we've been hit both sides. And maybe it's not right for me to take my time. But I've been through this twice, and now I've made my mind. 'Cause you've been on my mind. 'Cause you're changing, and I just don't know the side of you changing. And I don't know how to talk to you, 'cause you've been so cold right now, now, now. I don't wanna talk.
25, jeg har 26. Jeg glæder til det går.
Keep holding in my heart and brain for a long time. Never tell you a secret, 'cause I just share my feeling too. Just
Med den tid.
I hope you understand this feeling so strong.
Helt med det. Nok ikke det der road to back nu.
Baby, I'm falling. I really know you can, 'cause I will
PD.
tell you and you never know that I'm into you. The way you're smiling, diddy and wise, you're rose and fun, baby, you're my favorite one. You're my favorite one.
Start. Det er ret sjovt.
Wish you could feel everything what I feel, baby, I'm the one who put
Og så er det.
you in my
Oh. Lul.
But in the deep of my heart, I want you to know.
Oh. Okay. Oh, no, no. Ja, true. Det bliver sad. For eksempel dør nu. Det er muligt. Det er 100% sandsynligt nu. Og så er det en bitch. Også taget fint der, uden at spille så meget spil. Derovre, ikke? Ej, der er så langt. Se. it was. But it hardly was. So.
Climate change is like saying I really want a hot bod that's super shredded, but I never want to go to the f***ing gym. Problem is when you ask somebody, what is the government supposed to do? What the government in a democratic system is supposed to do is represent the will of the people. Nothing more and nothing less. So if your citizens are short-sighted or if they tend to vote in certain ways, that's what the government is going to do. Full stop. That's what'll happen. And
yeah, but that seems really scary to
it
live in
is. The issue is that the system works really well. I think that we are unbelievably divided right now in this country, so we can't get anything done. But that's how the system was designed. There are a lot of fact-based disagreements that masquerade as moral quandaries. Like people pretend that they're questions of morality, but they're not actually. They're actually disagreements of fact. I can give you a really good example of this.
Is this the
Do you remember, I'm sure you do, right? The whole January 6th riots?
Yes.
Yeah, so this had nothing to do with morality at all, okay? If you genuinely believed that the election was stolen, those people had every right, maybe even a patriotic obligation to be at the White House. If we truly believe that the election was stolen by the Democrats, right? But if you truly believe that the election was not stolen by the Democrats, then what the f?
I know you do all this debate bro shit regularly, right? And not to knock it, but in the sense of like you're talking to a lot of different people who are thinking about things.
I got the people's chamber.
And one of the things that comes up often is morality, right?
Yeah.
This comes up like the kind of ethics, systems of thought about things, and these often manifest in morality. Have you ever done like I don't know, I haven't never like thought. I mean, I've thought about this, but I've never like broken it down academically. I've never broken it down from I guess the forge of having had to discuss this with lots of people on the spot in front of an audience. Have you ever done something like assessing morality? Have you ever looked at like, all right, well, you fit in these categories because you think these ways?
Any moral system you have should be logically coherent, okay? It like makes sense when you line all the statements up, and it should be consistent. You like have the same set of rules you apply everything to, okay? Ideally, if I were to ask, so I feel like when people are asked a question, how do you feel about this thing? There's usually two things that people's minds go to. One is, do I have a visceral reaction to it, right? So if I say, how do you feel about eating shit? Oh, fuck, I have a sense. I've got a sense that like immediately says this is bad, is the first thing people appeal to. And then the second thing people appeal to is, what is the correct answer that I'm supposed to give given the groups that I belong to? I think that that's the second answer you give. When people run out of those two things, most people don't actually have a rigorous process by which they can evaluate whether something is good or bad, or whether they do or don't like something. I think that that's like that's something that I strongly believe in. Maybe people will disagree with that, but yeah. So for instance, if I say, how do you feel about socialized healthcare? Well, we don't have an initial like a sense response to that. Okay, well, what groups do I belong to? Okay, I'm a liberal, I'm a blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay, cool. I like universal healthcare, right? That's generally it. Now, they might think they know some justifications, but really what they're doing is they're just gonna repeat what they heard from the group, knowing that they have to support it. Yeah, because it's the group or whatever. What I want is I want to have some internal system that I've designed that allows me to take moral questions and generate moral answers, okay? Like, that's important to me. That's very important to me. It's one of the most important things to me. So how do we do this, okay? The very first question that we have to start off at, we have to go all the way back, okay, is we have to ask, what is goodness?
I kind of wanted to think like we could do that live. You want to do that live? You want to break down how I think about morality? Is that interesting at all?
If you want to, yeah, there's like a couple different questions about it, but yeah, how do you want to do that?
Well, I thought I'd let you I thought I would suggest the idea, see if you were interested, and let you take the lead on that, because this is something you do a lot with this. My thought was, I bet you could find in like a couple questions, you'd be like, oh, Filthy, you fit in this category kind of deal. I'm kind of curious if that was something you could do, something you could think about.
I mean, there's some questions. Do you think that like, oh man, this requires like okay, be careful. Hold on.
All right. Well, okay. Give me the caveats. Give me the warnings up front.
Yeah, the warnings are that I am an amateur Wikipedia philosopher. Okay, so Anything I say, don't go to like your PhD philosopher friend. It's like, oh, so you study ethics? Well, my friend Destiny perfectly categorized my ethical right. So okay, so
I will respond to that. My wife is my wife's a college professor, and one of the couples that we've been hanging out with is a friend of hers from work, and he's actually a philosophy professor. So
Nice.
I probably will have that conversation. If we have this conversation, I probably will have this conversation with him at some point.
Okay.
Like jumped in. But anyways, sure,
I guess
go
like
ahead.
fundamentally, so the first question would be like, do you think that morals exist independent of human minds, or do you think morals are like conceptually something that humans create?
One of the most widely held metaethical views is known as moral realism, the belief that there are moral facts in the same way that there are scientific facts. In this view, any moral proposition can only be true or false. And for a lot of us, our gut intuition tells us that there are moral facts. Some things are just wrong and others are indisputably right. Like, a lot of people think that gratuitous violence is always wrong and nurturing children is always right, no matter what. But you don't have to dig very deep into moral realism before you run into trouble. Like, for one thing, if there are moral facts, where do they come from? How do we know what they are? Are they testable, like scientific facts are? Are they falsifiable? And if morality is based on facts, then why is there so much disagreement about what's moral and what's not, as opposed to science, where there's often more consensus? This is what's known as the grounding problem. The grounding problem of ethics is the search for a foundation for our moral beliefs, something solid that would make them true in a way that is clear, objective, and unmoving.
In the sense of, do I think there's a right and wrong independent of humanity in interacting with that?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Oh my god.
Absolutely not.
Okay. Do you think that
God
when people make
bonkers.
moral statements, are they making like fact or truth verifiable propositions, or are they just like uttering a preference in other words? Like,
Can you give me
so somebody says, hey, murder is wrong. Is that person saying something like, there is
like fundamentally the essence of the universe thinks that murder is
not even that deep. So they're either, so when they say murder is wrong, are they either saying murder, boo, like they don't like murder, or are they saying there is a moral fact system that exists and murder
Oh my
is
god, I
contrary
want
to
to
that,
be
it's a
that
bad thing?
guy. Oh my god.
I don't understand the difference between those two
Insanity,
things. It feels like
brother.
perspective, right? So in the sense of, is murder bad? Probably. And why is murder bad? Because of the impact it has if we allow murder to happen wholeheartedly across or rampantly across like the system of society. But what is that actually
Being
saying?
chilling,
Saying
jeg ved ikke, hvad du lige sagde.
regular murder should be a commonplace thing if we start from some what we believe in. Sure.
Okay, I mean, like, I guess these are just like different schools of like moral anti-realism, I guess. So like you
Side
fall under like a
talk,
moral
yeah,
anti-realist. Like,
if you can't find a way to ground morality, you might be pushed toward another metaethical view, moral anti-realism. This is the belief that moral propositions don't refer to objective features of the world at all, that there are no moral facts. So a moral anti-realist would argue that there's nothing about gratuitous violence that's inherently wrong. Likewise, they'd say, if you look at the rest of the animal kingdom, sometimes nurturing your kids doesn't seem like it's that important. So maybe morality isn't the same for everyone, but still, most people you know, including yourself probably, are committed to some form of moral realism.
an anti-realism non-cognitivist. The reason why they're called non-cognitive is because they say that when other people are uttering moral statements, they're not actually uttering a moral statement at all. The grammar is like an illusion. They're really just expressing like an emotional state. They're saying murder bad. I don't like murder. That's really what they're saying. They're not actually making any factual statements.
Just one flavor of moral anti-realism is moral subjective.
Hey, yo, we got Byron's Car Wash live from Coney Island. Are you vaccinated? Yes, sir.
I was feeling thirsty. Your mom gave me a gallon of Henny to quench that, you heard?
It's no snow on the floor. He's really skiing to Coney Island on a hard top. What we do at Coney Island, Colette? Real, son. We keep it real.
Fuck your life. Bing bang.
He had too many shots. You want a shot?
Hey, yo, Ariana Grande, what's up, mama? I'll come to Coney Island, take a spin on the cyclone. I miss you.
Let's see that flip, boy. Yeah. With the yellow foams on.
I have 7 female wives. Go to my Instagram.
What do you want to tell Joe Biden right now?
What's up, baby? Take me out to dinner.
Hey, yo. This is the Kim and Kanye of Coney Island.
Hey, Kim ain't got shit on me.
Yo, he got his phone and his balls. Steve Jobs did not die for this.
If you see these dogs in your front yard, just know upstairs I'm going hard. Bing bong.
What the fuck? What the fuck? Okay. What the fuck? Holy shit.
This view says that moral statements can be true and false, right or wrong, but they refer only to people's attitudes rather than their actions. By this thinking, capital punishment is neither right nor wrong, but people definitely have preferences about it, and those preferences key into personal attitudes, but not into actual objective moral facts about the world. Like some people favor capital punishment and think it's just, others oppose it and think it's unjust. But it doesn't go any deeper than that. There are no moral facts, only moral attitude.
An anti-realist that's like an error theorist will say, okay, they are uttering like actual propositions. They're saying murder is bad. They're making statements, but all of these statements are false because all moral propositions are false. So that's like the difference between the two, I guess.
Okay. So I don't know how you want to do this. If you again, we're spitballing this, right? So, and I want to throw my
Feb corner, I have you.
But I'm doing it right now.
Go.
I'm like a couple glasses of bourbon in. This is midnight my time. I'm normally in bed by about now, so this is all off the cuff for this. And what?
Show us some butthole or something. What are we doing? Butthole! Butthole! Butthole!
I would like to view a human anus.
Respectfully towards women, though.
Hey, Joe Biden. Hey, Kamala. Show me your asshole, baby. Trump would do it. Trump would show me his asshole. I trust him. Why is Joe Biden scared? He's a fucking loser. That's why.
Talladega winner in the next. Oh my God! As you can hear the chants from the crowd, let's go, Brandon. Brandon, you told me you were gonna kind of hang back those first two stages and just.
Joe Biden probably has a weird goggin butthole. Joe Biden has a weird butthole, bro. Joe Biden has a weird butthole, bro. He's got a drink out of his shoe. That's what we do, baby. We in Dega, bro. We in Dega, man. We turned up all crazy. That's shooting.
How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel disgusting because it tastes like feet. Where are you from, fucking Barstool?
No.
Have you ever fucking experienced Talladega like this before?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, you're a fucking pussy. Because this is fucking Talladega.
Fuck Joe Biden.
Fuck Kyle Busch.
Her new nickname is Waterbed because last night she done pissed the tent.
She pissed in the tent.
That's Waterbed.
Do you confirm or deny these allegations?
Deny. The guy that I had sex with was the one that pissed the tent. The one that was just down here with the hat on that said fuck Joe Biden. He was standing there and he unzipped his pants and
And I pissed in the fucking tent. It burned. It burned a lot.
Are you concerned that his pee was burning?
That wasn't.
No concern. No concern.
What's up, dude?
What's up?
What's your name?
Jake.
Do you have any nicknames?
The faggot.
The faggot. That's why I wore this.
What does it mean to be an American?
It means to live in America where we're always free and we love our veterans.
We got fucking sketty. We got beer. We're going fucking nuts.
Are you guys going nuts?
We're going fucking nuts. I am.
This guy's going nuts. What do you like about being drunk?
What do I like about being drunk?
Yeah.
Getting fucked up.
What do you like to do when you're fucked up?
Have sex.
How many times have you fucked?
40.
We're here at Talladega. It's been 2 years since I was here previously, and we're here again. Sitting on a tire. That means I have VIP access. So this time, instead of being in the stands, I'm in the stands, but I'm also behind the scenes. We're here to learn about NASCAR, what it means, and most importantly, what the hell's going on. If you have to go number one, what do you do?
Let it rip.
It's actually harder than you
Let it
think to go to the bathroom in a race car if you have to go, so I always try to go before the race.
If you need to, you just go.
For realski?
Yeah, in your pants.
What about if you have to go,
It's happened. It's happened. Not to me, again, not to me, but a certain driver who won a race.
That's a
had
me.
it happen.
That's a me.
And, yeah.
I broke that habit a long time ago.
It is what it is, but it's kind of like playing chess, actually. Put yourself in the right spots for the right time. There's no potty breaks here.
Yeah.
So we've been banned from the press area due to our lines of questioning regarding urination. You like cars?
Huh? Love them.
How can we be so sure about that?
Huh?
How can we be so sure about that?
Because I like to go fast.
What's the fastest you ever gone?
100 plus.
100 plus what?
100 plus miles an hour.
100 plus what?
100 plus 2 equals 102.
And that's what the fuck we do.
Breaking news. Breaking news. You're watching Channel 5 with Andrew Callahan.
So how would you describe Talladega for someone who's never been here?
Rowdy, wild, traditional.
American, super American. Lots of beer getting destroyed.
Speed, history.
Liquor.
People that like to have a good time, like to smell
But
gas and oil.
Excessive drinking. Let's be. That's a big one right there.
It's definitely different than Talladega Nights, how they portray it. A lot of the dudes here are very professional and on their P's and Q's.
There's a person driving every one of these race cars. I mean, there's one of them. There's Landon over there.
I mean, your car is what gets you to the front. I mean, that's what gets you in the top 5. But I do think that it takes the driver to win. You just double check all your safety equipment and
Fuck Joe Biden!
Spin your butthole and fuck Joe Biden.
Fuck him!
Old man knows about Biden. Old man does.
Fuck Joe Biden! Fuck Joe Biden!
I'm a Vietnam vet, and we fight for this fucking country, you know. Bring back our people. Leave Joe Biden behind.
Fuck Kyle Busch! Where's that fucker Kyle Busch? Where's that fucker at?
That moves Kyle Busch all the way up the racetrack.
So why do people hate Kyle Busch so much?
All right. So first of all, Southern sport, right? I mean, obviously, redneck sport, yada, yada, yada. NASCAR fans have always, hated the Yankees, right? Not like the baseball team, but, people up north, you know?
Kyle Busch said that he liked Daytona better than Talladega, so if you're from around here, dude, you gotta fucking hate Kyle Busch, dude. Fuck Kyle Busch.
He has a brother named Kurt Busch who also used to get booed like fucking crazy, but they're from Las Vegas, Nevada.
3-3. Hey, 3-3, we love you, 3-3.
And they're both, especially when they were younger, shitheads, dude.
Kyle Busch and Joey Logano are in a fist fight. Kyle Busch walked over and threw a haymaker. Chaos down here on pit road.
My pit crew did absolutely nothing to help me out tonight. My truck drove like and these splitters are absolutely horrendous.
They're great drivers, okay? Winners, but they're very polarizing.
I love Kyle Busch.
He says it like it is. He has no filter.
He's a crybaby. He's always talking shit about his car, and it's never his fault. Fuck him. He ain't a driver.
Kyle Busch is a winner. Why so much hate for Kyle Busch here?
Because it's the same reason everybody hates Nickelback. Because the internet says so.
Fuck Kyle Busch!
What the
fuck? Kyle Busch! Fuck Kyle Busch! I'm a marketing major and I love these fucking kids right here. Show me your butthole! We're a marketing major!
What
are the principles of marketing 101? We want to reach the consumer. We want to get to know them. Demographic research product! Strategic advertisement! Yeah! He's ripping it! He's ripping it! We're going fucking nuts! Hell yeah! Well, show me your butthole! You show my butthole, you show your butthole! I can't do it, I'm at work!
Bend over, butthole cheek spread. That's what we want!
I love buttholes.
Yeah, if I'm being completely honest, I fucking love buttholes. I'll show my butthole. I'll show my butthole.
It finally happened. After days of deliberation, discussion, and countless requests, a rectum was finally revealed. Isn't this supposed to be a fucking ad for Cash App? How are we gonna bridge to the Cash App ad read? Did anybody mention Cash App during the course of our filming at Talladega? Oh yeah, that one kid, he said he'd Cash App me $50 if I shotgunned a beer and then shouted out his frat right after.
How did that feel?
Tough, it was tough.
It was tough? It was tough. It's a lot of carbonation, ain't it?
A lot of carbonation. Rush Sigma Chi!
Rush Sigma fucking Chi, baby!
Best frat ever. These guys are sick as shit.
Cash App, the best way to receive money for shotgunning a beer so long as you're 21 and older and don't plan on operating a motor vehicle.
So a lot of my the pals who were here earlier, a lot of them work for the government. I got a brother who works on the Iron Dome system that you see in Israel. He works on the code for that. And a lot of these guys have like normal jobs working under Biden, and it's all just kind of real interesting. We all come here. This is kind of like our Hajj. I call it the Wasp Hajj, the last great Wasp Hajj.
White Anglo-Saxon Protestant migration to Mecca.
This is our Mecca.
I think the biggest stereotypes are those stereotypes about rednecks, hillbillies, drinking beer. But NASCAR is also leaning in a direction, a good direction, and the diversification is happening right in front of our eyes.
Dale Earnhardt, nigga, do you wanna race? Wow. Mirror, mirror on the wall, bitch, I look great. Woo. Riding in the fast car, yeah, bitch, I might be. Riding in the NASCAR, yeah, bitch, I might be. Sipping on Bud Light like that shit was iced tea.
I made a song called Dale Earnhardt. One thing led to another, man, and you know, now I'm just out here, like, and a lot of people out here recognize me and shit. That's the crazy part. Like, I'm not gonna hold you, like, growing up, for me, it was like more of like a fashion statement. Like, I don't watch NASCAR. It was more of like, oh, like, this shit looks cool, like, this shit has Scooby-Doo, and like, you know, I'm from Florida, so, bro, like, we listen to the same music, we both drink beer and shit. This shit's like exhilarating, bro.
Big baby Earnhardt, I'm so icy. Money.
It's not just for the South or who the stereotypical audience is. You know, everybody loves NASCAR. It's just a matter of exposure. I think the sport is moving in the right direction. Alvin Kamara is actually on our outreach program.
What's on your mind right now?
Oh my god.
Ja, det var fedt. Det var gode tider af Among Us under covid. Fuck, det var sjovt. Der fandt vi ud af, hvem der var truly gamers, og hvem der ikke var.
Butthole for some reason.
Can you describe your ideal butthole in detail?
Describe my butthole in detail.
No, your ideal butthole, not your own butthole.
Lickable, you know. When you eat that shit like dehydrated dog, you know what I'm saying?
Like what?
Like a dehydrated dog, you know what I'm saying?
I don't know what you mean.
Like a dehydrated dog, like a dog that's dehydrated. You know, a dog when it goes to its water bottle, it's so dehydrated. So
a dehydrated dog?
Yes.
Show your dick. The only reason why I came here was to see some motherfucking wiener, some pee-pee. Who the fuck has a penis right now? Like, everybody whip it out. Any wiener is good wiener.
Any wiener is good wiener unless it's crooked.
Wiener is wiener. Better, like, you know what? I love coochie and they'll fuck anybody. So why the fuck is it not pee-pee?
What's up,
What?
America?
What's going on, man?
Fucking America sucks.
Why?
Because of Biden.
That fast? It
Not
sucks?
true.
That bastard sucks bad. Yeah, he sucks bad. I've been coming here for goddamn years and he ain't spoiling my good time. And if they want to come to my house and deal with me about it, hey, I'll fuck them up.
Have you been enjoying your life recently?
Yes, well, other than being aggravated at all the bullshit calls that's been going on with the damn Biden administration. No tequila. So, young man, listen to me. I want all of you to listen to me. I am 52 years old. If somebody tells you you have to do something, that's communism. They're taking away your rights. They are absolutely stripping your rights as a United States American. As far as vaccinations goes, hey, I did mine, but nobody should tell you what your choice is. That is communism. Hey, next week they'll be telling you can't drink a Coca-Cola. What is that? That's communism. They're already deleting comments off of YouTube,
Brothers,
Facebook,
sisters,
all these other channels.
What do you think it means to be an American?
To be an American. Someone that loves the country, that would put their fucking life down for it and not fucking send all the jobs overseas or not 13 fucking 13 force people.
Force people.
I feel it. I just want to say, Trump 2024, fuck Joe Biden.
Here's to the women we love the best. We love them the best when they undressed. We fuck them standing, walking in line. If they had wings, we'll fuck them flying. And when they're dead and long forgotten, we'll dig them up and fuck them riding. If water was beer and I was a duck, I'd swim my way down and drink my way up. But water ain't beer and I ain't a duck, so we gonna take this shot and get fucked up. Woo! Fuck Kyle Bush. Here's the honor. Here's the getting on her, and here's the staying on her. If you can't come in her, come on her. I offered my honor, she honored my offer, and all night long I was on her and off her. Here's the honor. Roll motherfucking goddamn tide. If you want to get to heaven and walk the streets of gold, you gotta know the password. It's roll tide roll.
Are you rapping?
What?
Are you rapping?
No, I don't rap. Hold up. Let me get a fuck Joe Biden.
Fuck Joe Biden. Fuck Kyle Busch. Fuck Joe Biden.
Kyle Busch and Kyle Busch.
Fuck Kyle Busch. First and foremost, he's a bitch.
Fuck Kyle Busch.
Fuck him.
Fuck Joe Biden.
Liberals fucking suck. They're all retarded.
We want my home.
Fuck Kyle Busch. Why? He's a bitch. Fuck Kyle Busch.
He voted for Hillary.
Jesus fucking Christ. Den var altså sindssyg. Holy shit. Fuck Kyle Busch, han lyder based.
I'm absolutely...
Den skal jeg bagefter. Beta med. Skal jeg have noget kaffe? Nå, den er død. Ja, det er lidt sent for kaffe, men det er okay. Det er okay. Går jeg se lidt senere, så er det. Fuck Joe Biden, fuck. Hvad var det, han hed? Kyle Busch? Fucking retards. Hey! Hvis Channel 5 kom ned til Roskilde Festival, så ville der nok også komme et syret segment ud af det. No fucking doubt. Men det er nok tæt til mere anarkisme end right wing. Total.
wasn't expecting to be doing this right now, although it could be fun. So thoughts on that for like starting with that. Okay, so I mean, I don't know how much you want to explore this, but your thoughts. Why not murder, right? If we're looking at that, what's the bad part of murder? Do you believe in like inherent value of human life?
Oh, okay. So this is, so if we back up, so if you want to get into a question of like, where does your particular like moral system come from, or how do you like generate like rights and wrongs basically, or?
Yeah, kind of. I was thinking of a thought process. My thought process was, hey, you talk about this all the time, and this kind of stuff, a lot of the hypotheticals in particular are very difficult to entertain with people, just like, if you're having a dinner party, because people look at you like you're insane when you want to talk about this stuff, or
sure.
you talk about it like that. But part of the fun of that is thinking about, well, where does it start from? Like I had a roommate in college that I'm pretty sure we were matched together from the university solely because we had the same first name, right? I'm pretty sure that was the depth of their matchmaking on this. But he had come from a, what is it called? It's like theology school, like
a monastery or seminary.
I think it's seminary, something like that. Anyways,
Okay.
he had been a youth pastor. He had gone to school for this type of stuff before, and then had come to this college as like another degree after this. And some of the conversations we had, just by being roommates, were very interesting. And it for us fundamentally, and he was a very rational, very interesting person, but he also had a very deep belief in religion that I just didn't share. And when I kind of pushed him on this and kind of tried to get to the bottom of, well, why? What about this is something that's interesting to you? His moral sense started with the idea that human lives had value. That was his starting point, and that everything else kind of for him followed from that. And I could never get him to give me a satisfactory justification of why that might be true. And that's for us where we kind of diverged from that. Like the rest of it diverged from that point when you push down on it. But for me, it was interesting at that point to talk to him to get to there. Maybe it isn't interesting. Maybe it's not interesting for everyone. Like I'm sure it can bore some people to tears for this. But for me, it was interesting to think about that on that level of that, to look at, well, why do you believe as you do, and where does it come from, and where did it start? And that to me is interesting. So I don't know if you want to do the 101 of that. I'm interested in chatting through that.
Yeah. So do you want to chat through like where you come from or where I come from, or do you want to do both, or how do you want to do this?
Let's do both. If we got time, let's do both. Let's start there. So I thought maybe you could help me come down on like some camp, so then we could contrast that potentially if there is a contrast, or don't if there isn't.
Well,
so
I think
I don't know where I fall on that past like. Anyways, go ahead.
Gotcha. So the way that I work with morals or whatever is I the most foundational thing, the most like foundational statement that I think I can make about like existence in general is like I would assume that I exist because to not is to everything else becomes absurd. For my existence, it seems that I have some sort of preferences for the world. Like I prefer to be happy, I prefer to be healthy. And then it seems as though I should probably maximize those preferences in the world. So I need to do what I can to make myself happy and healthy. And then when it comes to intersecting with other people, it seems that humans like synergize with other people pretty well. So interacting with other humans in positive ways that further them being positive towards me and me being positive towards them seems to like increase the general happiness that I can experience. So everything kind of comes from this like reciprocated self-interest, if that makes sense. Basically, there's a ton of agents that exist in a particular area. If all of these agents are bought into the idea that they have to kind of like look out for every other agent, then they kind of like synergistically increase like the well-being and the happiness of every other agent and themselves. And that's kind of the world that I push forward into. If that makes sense. What is goodness? Like, what do we consider to be the good? In my actual opinion, this question is unanswerable. This is a question that the answer to this question is going to draw on something external of like human knowledge. Good is an ill-defined concept. I don't believe that there is an actual answer, blah, 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 blah. So I have like my own little answer for goodness, basically, okay? And I'll walk you through this a little bit, okay? So since I don't believe that there is like an objective good, truthful, good, moral, whatever, I'm not religious. I don't believe in any sort of like moral realism or objective moral truth because I don't think that we have ways to feel or see morality. I don't think we can sense it or detect it or argue about it. Basically what I do is I say that there are things that I have that I want to fulfill in my life that make me happy. Those things are, to me, those things are good. So I basically have some like internal happiness. I try to maximize and fulfill my own internal happiness. Well, I'll just call this IH. You guys have to remember what this shit stands for. If this is like what I'm trying to maximize, right? My goal is to live a life where I can satisfy this like internal happiness as much as humanly possible. Now, typically, okay, because I'm not a god, all right, I'm not like capable of doing most things on my own. I can't hunt on my own. I can't create clothing. I can't build houses. There's a lot in my life that makes me happy that I need, that I can't provide for myself. What I need to do is I need to get this from other people as well, right? As a side note, I assume that everybody else functions off of this very same moral principle. Now, people are going to argue that they don't, but I think they do. What I call internal happiness, I think they call religion or some other weird bullshit or deontological. I don't care. I think that most people try to satisfy some internal preferences they have. So what I realize is I can't satisfy these on my own, so I have to satisfy these by way of interacting with other people. In order for them to be motivated to satisfy my internal happiness, I have to do something that increases their happiness as well, right? So like economics, I wouldn't say that happiness is like a zero-sum game, right? So if one person on his own can generate 5 units of happiness and another person can generate 5 units of happiness, I think that these two people coming together could generate 50 units of happiness. The more people that work together, the more overall like happiness that you get. So if I agree with this, right? So I want to be happy, and I want to maximize the amount of happiness for myself. I need to have other people around me that are capable of like feeding into my own happiness, right? I have to have like a group of people, family and friends, society, whatever you want to call it, that are capable of like satisfying the needs that I have, right? So this might be, we'll just put like house, clothes, friendship, subs. If I have my internal happiness that I'm trying to have satisfied through other people, through these things, right? I would assume that they have their own internal happiness as well. So we kind of have to like enter this like exchange where like I'm offering things, they're offering things, and then together we all kind of work to build upon this type of like happiness through every person. This is like roughly my moral view of like how the world works. I think that everybody's trying to satisfy things that make them happy individually, and I think that we do that by satisfying each other's like desires and wants, so that we all like kind of like work off of each other's happiness, make each other's happiness. Is there an argument against this idea? I think this is the best way to view things. I think that if you go through this model, I think it gives you a good understanding of how other people work. I think it gives you a good approach to other relationships. I think it gives you a good approach to how the world works. If we take this little mini model here to be true, from this position, we get into this kind of world where we have, I guess you could call this a form of like social contract.
Sure. I'm concerned that hearing something like that I can follow the logic from the premise of that and be like, yeah, that all makes sense, and I have trouble challenging the initial premises of that. Can we get there from a different route? So like if you poke me, can we see if again, I don't know, you do this a lot more than I do, and I don't know if this is a reasonable idea for a conversation or not, but if you poke me independent of giving me that, I don't want to just be like, yeah, that sounds really reasonable, I agree with that. But if you poke me for starting, can we get there from a different route?
I mean, it depends on, it just depends on, I mean, yeah, there's tons of different ways we could get there, right? Theologically, you could probably get there in some ways. I mean, yeah. Right?
I don't know. I'm asking. I don't have the answer for that, because it sounds reasonable to me. I guess from my perspective, like, I sometimes get into my trouble with my wife, because I'm not a very woke guy, in the sense that, like, although I agree with some of the sentiments being expressed there, I don't often agree with the route that's being taken. And my wife sometimes looks at me like I'm an asshole for this. And from me, I guess the perspective starts for me that it's like, all right, well, I want these things. I want my things to do well. I want me and mine to do well first. And then when I look at that, well, how does that spread out societally? It kind of looks like, well, I didn't choose to be born as I was born. I didn't choose to be born here with the privileges or lack thereof that I have for my life. So what do I look for in a society? I look for a society that basically tries to be as useful to all members in that society as it can be. In other words, even if you and again, I'm maybe butchering this, but the basic thought for me is, I didn't choose this. The goal is, and although if I looked at from my life right now, if I built the perfect system for me right now to advance my goals, that's not a very equitable system. So rather than start there, it seems like the starting point for me would be, we'll build the system from the point where you weren't born, where you don't already exist in it. How is the best way to spread the most number of benefits to the most number of people in this system? Starting points. Is that? Is that
Yeah, for sure. So this is actually encapsulated pretty well with there's a guy called John Rawls, and he proposes something called the veil of ignorance. And the idea is that when you're designing a society, it should be designed from behind a curtain, where you're going to step through the curtain and you don't know which member of society you're going to become. So the idea is to design a society that like maximizes the amount of happiness and well-being for every individual in society, so that when you step through that curtain, no matter which role you assume, you're going to be in like as okay a position as possible, basically.
Do you know critiques of that, like off the top of your head?
Yeah, but they get weird. I think I like that like position, but yeah.
Okay, so that's for me a starting point for that. That's not necessarily individual morality, I guess, for that, or individual ethics for that, but that for me societally is like where I look at that. So when I try to evaluate things that are coming out around that, it kind of looks to me, when I try to look at things that are being suggested as societal changes, part of me looks at it from that perspective. Is that advancing that goal? Because again, like if I were building the system that best benefited me now as I was now, certainly I don't need to go back to the level. I can be like, well, screw everyone who's not from like how I am, but I can never have guaranteed that I was born as I was, you know?
Sure,
So,
yeah. Yeah, I think it's pretty important when you're doing these questions. I think we ultimately agree on this, but like everybody has to be bought into whatever the kind of moral system is. And if you start making statements like, well, I can do this, but not for other people, then you kind of have to accept that other people can make the same statements, and then everything becomes combative very quickly. And unless you're born as literally like the strongest, most capable person in society with the most connections, you're probably going to get fucked. And even if you are born that person, there's probably going to be some like violent uprising or whatever that's going to fuck you too or whatever, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really dangerous I mean, certainly I don't think anyone's advocating for that, but it's super dangerous to advocate for the society in which the best off of the people in that society have these chances for success. It's yeah, for sure. Okay, so can we, with the starting idea of poking from there, can we do anything with that? Can we go anywhere with that? Is there any interesting stuff that comes out of it? Any challenges to this? So where does this, for example, if you seem much more comfortable to place that in a general spectrum of how to look at this. So where do you diverge from that, or where does that go? Where are the branches that come out of that? Does that make sense?
I don't know. There's probably a lot. I don't really know that many. Like from that point, like where the different places that you can end up at, or?
Yeah, sure. Exactly. Like okay. So, all right. So what are some of the, if you start from that premise, what are some of the things that are outcomes from that, and where are the decision points that diverge on that? You know, like,
so I think that the problem at this point is that, in my opinion, ethics isn't generally the most useful conversation, or it can be, but I think that what happens is most people end up agreeing on most things ethically. We just get into arguments that appear to be ethically divergent arguments, but in reality, they're just kind of like disagreements of fact, I think sometimes, which makes a lot of arguments that appear to be ethical arguments are actually different types of arguments. So a really good example of this, might be like universal healthcare. So I broadly believe that most conservatives and most liberals in the United States want people to be happy and healthy. I think that that's generally true. I don't think Republicans want everybody to be sick and dying, right? Now, Democrats seem to think that a universal healthcare system is better. Republicans don't trust the government. They seem to think that the private market can deal with it better, right? So when we get these arguments over like, you know, what's better, universal healthcare or not, you know, people are very quick. It's always an ethical argument. Do you want people to be hungry? Do you want people to be sick and not be able to pay for their treatments? Why do you want to condemn people to this? But the reality is that like, I don't think either side necessarily disagrees on the ethics of it. They just disagree on like the fact-based part or the application thereof. So a lot of ethical arguments, or there's a lot of like fact-based practical arguments that are masquerading as ethical arguments.
I guess my first thoughts of that are one, maybe that's true if you're looking at good faith actors in that, and I feel like I guess divorcing that from politics, perhaps that is true, right? If you say most people who are either Democrat or Republican believe that, I probably grant that to you. If I think if you say most politicians who are Democrat or Republican are following through with those ideals, I wouldn't agree with that. I don't think that. I think it assumes a good faith acting, and that may not always be the case. And then the second part of that is, what do you mean by fact-based arguments for that? Do you mean in the sense of, well, what is the cost of these? How do you best do that? Is that what you mean when you say fact-based arguments?
When I say fact-based, I mean that like people don't agree on what the empirical outcomes will be.
I see.
Yeah, that's it. And if they did agree, then yeah, like if we all had all the facts in front of us about minimum wage, my firm belief is that almost everybody would agree that like if a 20 an hour minimum wage or 15-hour minimum wage helped the majority of workers, everybody would agree with it. If it didn't, then everybody would disagree with it. I believe that, yeah.
Doesn't that miss just slightly part of the equation there? Because let's say for example that by and large increased wages are increasingly positive for people who are being paid those wages, right? But isn't there a cost to increasing wages? So isn't the other side of that equation then not just what are the benefits of applying a thing, but also what are the costs, or what do we give up by having to pay for or apply that thing?
Yeah, but again, at the end of the day, I think I really do think that it's more like epistemic questions of like, how do we gather truth or knowledge, or how do we know what we know? I think it's those more than ethical or moral questions, because again, it might say, so I could make this statement. I could say this, okay? Raising the minimum wage isn't an ethical question. It's actually just an empirical question. And then a conservative might counter. They'll say, no, you're wrong, actually. Because for the ethical question of raising a minimum wage, it's actually not about whether or not it's not about whether or not you should raise it to make workers better off. It's about like the idea that if the government steps in and starts doing these horrible things, all of us will be worse off. But I think that that's just a fact-based question one step removed, because then the next question is like, okay, well, what if I could show you a world where there is no minimum wage and you have that freedom secured, and then every company in the world fucks every worker over? Is that a better world than one where the government raises the minimum wage and then every single worker is better off? And then I feel like now it'll be hard to get them to agree with the hypothetical, of course, but I think that there are very few people that are like ethically married to their policy positions. I think that generally it's just a disagreement of fact over what will the empirical outcomes be of any given policy position. That's how I feel, at least.
I see. And how do you argue the? Maybe I can't ask the question. Maybe I can ask the question. Not from the sense of structurally. So what are you doing then when you're engaging with someone where you think the difference in opinion lies with how they're interpreting the facts then? So
it's really hard. You have to.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible because this epistemic divide exists where the way that we gather information or truth is just fundamentally different. Like most people come to conversations armed with Facebook memes and Twitter headlines.
There are numerous studies that show right-wing males are stronger, hotter, and have more sex than left-wingers. So right off the bat, we know for a fact that right-wingers are stronger, hotter, and have more sex based on these studies. I don't know if you want to look up all these studies or just let me move on.
Yeah, I don't think this really has anything to do with the vaccine, so let's go to the next thing.
Okay, well, it's based on eugenics, so.
And if they haven't done any real research, you're never going to. You're breaking through is going to be very, very hard. That's like a whole other. Now you're asking me like a relationship question, not really like a philosophy discourse, because it's going to be about like being a friend with them, being gentle over long periods of time, inserting new ideas and facts or whatever. Like
Yeah, I guess I wasn't even asking in the hypothetical of like
Dude,
what the fuck? And I actually meant like you seem to be doing this fairly regularly with the people you're engaging with. Like, what have you found works for you for this? Did you get to points where you can? Because it feels like if you're processing information, even if you're collecting and processing information differently from the other person, it seems very difficult to reach a point where you can even communicate about it. So what are you doing to bridge that?
So here's like something that I do that I believe is unique to me that has given me a lot of help in these conversations. So generally, broadly speaking, we can either talk about things that exist in reality, or we can talk about like how we should act in reality. These like two different types of statements, right? These are descriptive statements and normative statements. So what happens oftentimes is people get so hung up on the what should we do, they won't even like grant these kind of descriptive statements of fact. And when you're not willing to do that, you've completely lost the conversation. There's a million examples. I can't think of any right now. Let's say that like two people are arguing over whether or not women make false accusations of rape, right? Let's say this is like the argument, right? And how should the Me Too movement handle, right? So a lot of people on the left, and they've now, I think over the past few years, they've realized the fuck up of this, right? The hashtag believe all women. They don't even want to concede, like, no women lies, everyone should be believed, every blah, 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 right? Okay, so not only are you making a moral claim that we should believe all women, you're also making a descriptive claim that like women don't lie, okay? Now, the problem is that if you don't have somebody that's already fully bought into your argument, if they're on the other side or in the middle, they're going to look at your descriptive fact that women don't lie and they'll be like, I know a lot of women that lie, that's bullshit. Or they might even have a personal example. So my goal is that like, if there are problems that exist between two groups of people, there's probably some reason why these problems exist. So you have to acknowledge descriptively like, hey, yeah, you know, some people do lie. This is a problem for sure. But then like once you've acknowledged that descriptive reality, then you kind of move off to the side. It's like, okay, but what should we do, right? We're not going to treat everybody as liars, right? You know, I think it's good to start from a foundation of like trust but verify. Take people more seriously when they make these accusations, but you don't have to blanket #believe all women and just, you know, like run off a cliff like that, you know, if that makes sense.
Yep. By that general breakdown on that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get interesting hypotheticals?
Ja, kom videre.
That particular
Giv mig den
conversation,
quest.
necessarily
Kom
that one.
nu.
But, any interesting hypotheticals to entertain here now about any of this?
I don't get interesting hypotheticals ever. All my conversations are dog shit on my stream because everybody's a fucking moron. So no.
Can't be as bad as that.
It absolutely is as bad as that. I'm insulted that you'd even imply that it's not that bad. It is absolutely dog
you're
shit.
implying that you're a huge sellout is what you're implying by that, right?
What do you
Isn't
mean?
that the implication of that? If every conversation you're doing is intellectual dog shit for you to do it, you're doing it for alternative reasons. Those are
Well, I'm doing it because I believe strongly in the things that I want to talk about, but most people just aren't equipped to talk. Like they're coming at me with like headlines from articles, or they don't even know anything about what they're talking about, and then they just scream and they don't want to engage in any hypotheticals because they're worried it'll make them look bad, and it's like, okay, well, this is bullshit. Yeah.
So then, is it a service you're doing for your community in the sense of you're essentially clarifying for your viewers the dog shit that you're encountering?
Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah.
Okay, I got it. Okay. Well, if you had, all right. Well, I guess from my perspective, I would have loved to have done some hypotheticals if you had some. Just kind of like.
Are you saying just like moral hypotheticals or?
Yeah, let's play some moral hypotheticals. You got some moral hypotheticals to play with?
Jesus, a moral.
I'm putting you on the spot here, but to be fair, you did put me on the spot by saying, "Hey, do you want to do something later?" You're like, "Yeah, let's do it now."
Oh shit, that's true. You're American. Moral hypotheticals.
I'm American?
Wait, aren't you American?
Yeah, but what was the relevance of that to?
Oh, I was just thinking of like, because I could ask questions about like.
I have a UK citizenship as well, if that helps.
Sure, I was thinking like, well, there's like Palestinian questions, there's things going on with natives in Canada, but I'm trying to think of something like more relative to like the United States, I guess. But that's really condescending though. It's not like you don't know about any other country or whatever. I was just trying to think of something more like local to us. Or if you were like,
isn't the point of a hypothetical that we're not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily need to be based in reality for that to be interesting, because it's essentially a clarification of an idea as opposed to, you know.
Yeah, sure. But fun hypotheticals like spin out from reality. So like, for instance, there's a lot of questions about like Canadian natives. Okay. And one interesting question is, let's say there's like a native group that exists, and let's say that this group has access to lands that are just lush with like fresh water, trees and fruits, maybe roots that can make medicine that can help your people, right? But let's say you've entered like an agreement that they can run those lands. Let's say that you as a country that have these like natives under your protection, and you have like a responsibility to them. Do you have an obligation to your people to invade their lands and steal their stuff if they say they don't want you to use them? Or should you just let your people live worse lives, or maybe even suffer some diseases or whatever, or not have access to as much water because you're respecting that treaty with those like native people? What's like the correct call there?
Yeah, and if you push that out further too, because that's not even the like necessarily the hypothetical extreme, right? Because what you described is two different groups with some different organizing, not necessarily morality, but different two different groups essentially what you described. So, well, if there's not a lot of competition, in other words, if there's lots of other resources available, that competition isn't such a big deal. But if you force the extreme on that with, well, what if it's your group versus their group? How do you justify, for example, taking another group for that? And that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that, but it's certainly I'd play around with that a bit if you want. So I guess the clarification of that question would be, under what situations are you willing to aggress or take from another group to benefit your group?
Wait, repeat, say that again.
Sure. Under what situations are you, because what you just described, okay, from my perspective, what you just described are two essentially different groups there to some degree, right?
Yeah.
So you got the country saying we're taking care of our people, and you've got the subset of this going, well, we're a separate group and we have these resources, and these resources don't need to be shared to the larger group because there are resources, right? At what point is it justifiable for the other group to say we're taking your resources regardless of what you want?
Yeah, sure.
That's kind of the question you're asking, right?
Although, well, the added stipulation was that they're natives that exist like within your territory, so it makes it a little bit hairier. Because for the other one,
because at some level you go, well, I don't know if that makes it hairy or not.
No, actually, you're right. It doesn't make it hairy. That's just a more specific example, because, but from that one example, you could generalize out. It's like, well, let's say it's okay there. Couldn't you theoretically justify the invasion of any land forever to take resources that would help your people, right?
Yeah, especially if you put your people ahead of other people. If that's part of the ethos of your group is that, well, we look out for ours first, which I think most groups are looking at that way. So when is it justified? That's an interesting question. So I guess we come to now, for example, we look at now time and we say, well, okay, well, what have our countries done in the past, and who have they wronged, and what have they taken from people? I mean, it's interesting to me to look at that in the sense of, well, what are the obligations we owe to groups that are currently disadvantaged from things we've done in the past? What are the obligations there? So were they morally justified in doing this? And if they were, how? And then what does that mean now when there's some degree of assimilation or some degree of these ancestors existing here who might be disadvantaged from that? That's a really interesting question, because I don't know the answer to that, but I'm certainly willing to discuss that for a minute. What are your, I guess, to make that into a real world thing, what are your thoughts on reparations for people who were slaves at some point?
I think it's a really rough one. I think that if specific contracts exist, I think those should be honored. So there was an agreement a long time ago relating to the 40 acres and a meal stuff, and arguably you can say this is a broken agreement. I don't know if it's a contractual thing, but for things like that, I think it's fine. More generally speaking, reparations is just an idea, a kind of an ethereal, broader idea. I don't think it's a good idea, because it's so hard to figure out the level of accountability, who gets what or whatever. I think you can only honor specific contracts on the books,
I don't know. I don't know that. If you can only honor certain books, certain contracts in the book, I certainly come to the idea that if you look at the impact of descendants of people who were essentially taken advantage of with these contracts, but people who weren't, you look at outcome differences now, and you go, well, shit, we don't want that. Societally, we don't want that. We want the best for the people in our society as much as that can happen. And if we are looking at systemic differences that are root causes, are things that happened long in the past, well, certainly we want to address those as much as we can. But as you said, it's super insanely complicated to look at, well, exactly how do you do that, and what is fair and moral for that? So I don't know.
Even more fundamentally, do you really want to address differences because of root cause a long time ago, or do you just want to solve issues in society now? Right? So if we change the hypothetical a bit, let's say that one group of people got scammed a long time ago by another group of people, their ancestors, right? And then we fast forward to modern day America, and let's say that the group of people that did the scamming, their average net worth is $40 million. And the people that got scammed, their average net worth is $10 million. Is this something that we really want to ameliorate with public policy? Do we care that much? Or is it more just we should help the lowest people in society, and reparations are kind of another way to get to that end goal? That's kind of what I'm.
Yeah, and fuck, thank God I'm not a goddamn policymaker for this shit, because at what point is that acceptable? At what point do you go, well, 10 million's enough and 40 million's enough, but 40,000 compared to 10 million certainly isn't enough. Yeah. And how do you rectify that? It seems and I certainly, if I step back for another second too and ignore that exact question, but look at some of the implications of that question, do I feel like the descendants of people who have done something morally reprehensible should be punished for the decisions of their ancestors? On a part of me, I look back at that and go, no, that doesn't make any sense either. If you were, let's say that you were the child, let's make it as morally easy as possible. Let's say that Hitler raped someone and had a child by this woman who wasn't consenting to this at all. Is that child, as the son of Hitler, in some way responsible for Hitler's actions with this? You look at stuff like that and you're like, well, that's kind of fucked up when you think about that. But what is the solution for something like that? What is the solution for these wrongs have occurred, or these things have occurred that have disadvantaged some group to another, who are now essentially your co-society members, the people who are in your group, if you define your group as country here for this.
It gets really, really, really hairy, and then you're gonna have to start to assign levels of responsibility, and you're gonna have to give numerical values to this stuff. I think it's almost impossible, and it gets super messy. Even when we talk about things in the U.S., for instance, is it morally? Would it be the morally righteous thing to do to return land to certain native tribes or whatever? Let's say not based on contracts, but based on morally who had the right to own it, right? Well, let's say that some tribe gets some piece of land returned to them. Well, let's say that another native comes up and he's like, hey, this tribe stole this fucking land from my family in the 1300s. This is bullshit. Well, who rightfully owns anything, right? When it comes to land, it's just those types of issues get so hairy. I generally prefer, this is why I said earlier when it came to reparations, if there are contracts, then we have a process by which we review and resolve contract disputes, a legal process that should be respected. But when it comes to like moral culpability with people that are already dead, you can trace it back recursively so much until you find like, what man first set foot on this continent, to figure out who rightfully owns and who are their heirs and what happened. And yeah, I think it's just so hard to do. I'm not really interested in those conversations.
Life is competitive to some degree, right? Like life is not about competing for resources, is not about everyone comes out of this equally. So if you get to a point, maybe now societally, maybe not, where you're like, society is stable enough where we can worry about, not just how do we fuck our neighbors and best able to us do well, but now we look at, well, we've assimilated our neighbors and now we're looking at how do we do well by them.
Yeah.
That's still then, you can't go back historically forever to fix all the things that have happened, because inevitably you'll run into competition, and the competition is going to have been won by people who aren't always doing this in the, what now is the morally best way to do that. But then you're also running into the fact that, like, I think I heard, I can't remember who it was now at this point said it, but challenging the assumption that society that we all take as granted now is actually that deep of an institution in terms of how no, that's not even lucky. It's the wrong way of putting that. The veneer of civilization isn't that deep when you actually start poking at it. So how much would it take to collapse that, for example? So how far are we far enough ahead of the things that are done to get here that we can look back and be like, well, now we're like handing out for the losers of this, or the people who didn't make it, or the countries that have taken over, the tribes that lost, or whatever else you look at it that way. So I don't think I said that very clearly, but the idea being, where do you draw the line in looking back, and what are you judging to think that we're to a point where we have the luxury of doing that?
Yeah, I mean, like, and the answer either of those answers can be argued over like infinitely, right? Yeah. Like, how far back do you go? Who do you hold responsible for what? Even for a given crime, right? Because you'll have left-leaning people will say things like, we need to compensate black people for slavery. And, very far right-leaning people say, you're absolutely right. We need to go back to the African tribes that sold their fellow Africans into slavery and make them pay, right? So it's like, well, fuck, like, who's right and who's wrong in terms of how far back you go to draw the line? It gets like super, super, super hairy to try to, it's a pointless conversation. Yeah. Like I said, I don't even, these types of discussions are so.
I agree with the pointless conversation, except for the fact that we end up legislating some of this stuff. So unfortunately, to flip back to the question, I think you started with, which was something along the lines of, what do you do with like tribal lands or lands that were tribal lands that were taken by, for example, the US government for this? Well, what is the response to that? Is the response that we don't care about the past of how this country behaved, and instead what we're looking for is the betterment of all of our citizens, regardless of their heritage, to the best of our ability, and we try to go from there? Is that a adequate response to that? Or is there a different like route that you're taking for that? Because it's interesting and confusing as fuck to answer. Because if you look at that in some sense, you're like, well, clearly groups who have been taken advantage of now, in the past rather, now are at a disadvantage for outcomes. But what do you do about that? And where do you start looking to fix that from? I think if you go down the route of historically some group has been wronged or some group has been taken advantage of, as you said, you go in for infinity, because, if somewhere down the line someone's been fucked always, so I don't know. Like, it's hypothetically it's interesting, but then societally it's a bit scary almost to look at. Well, we're starting to discuss these things. We are discussing these things. We're talking about legislating these things.
Yeah, unfortunately. And again, I don't know how far we'll get. I don't know if we'll ever get to like any type of actual formal reparations, just because that, even among the left, that's like a really like difficult conversation topic to have. On a broader and then tangential point, unfortunately, a lot of these conversations, and I'm getting to feel this more and more recently, are like pretty spite driven. I feel sometimes like it really does feel like people aren't interested to figure out what the best outcome is. They're more just like want to assign blame to people, which is really frustrating because it makes my side look really bad if I'm arguing. A really good example of this, for instance, is like I don't feel like tax the rich. Like, I don't care about taxing rich people. What I care about is, do we have enough money to fund the social programs that we need to have like equitable outcomes in the United States? Now, to get those programs funded, we're almost definitely going to have to tax rich people more. But like, taxing people is never the goal. That's just like a byproduct of what we have to do in order to get our programs funded. But instead, like when you talk about taxing wealthy people, it feels very vindictive. Like, people out there fucking hate Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and shit. And it's like, we shouldn't hate these people. Like, they're wild successful. You know, if they've done like bad things or crimes or whatever, that's fine. But like, don't hate them. Like, just tax the fuck out of them and fund our programs. Like, it feels really vindictive.
I agree with that, except with the caveat of sometimes it's very frustrating. I mean, and maybe this is just me in my life as opposed to reflecting on this as some bigger picture, but it's frustrating as fuck to hear, like, for example, that, you know, I pay taxes and I pay a significant portion of the income that I make, which is you know, not particularly significant income in the greater scheme of things, in taxes. And that's, you know, if I do nothing else for the society, I am at least contributing that element of it. And I guess maybe you could argue that some of these companies that avoid these taxes, or these individuals who avoid these taxes, are making contributions elsewhere, and maybe that puts up for it, maybe. But a part of me goes, well, shit, why the fuck do people who are just that much wealthier than me not have to put any of that money back in directly into taxes? Like, so I hear the point of, we don't really give a shit about taxes, but at the same level, there is some degree of, I don't invest in society because my thought is I love society. I invest in society because the basic reason for doing that seems to be because I want all people in that society, regardless of how they came into it, to be given some degree of equal opportunity for that, right?
Sure, yeah.
That's the rough goal of that.
And if there are wealthy people that are breaking like laws or rules or whatever, that's again, I can totally understand.
Or through like, I don't even think they're breaking laws, right? This is essentially legal loopholes.
Yeah, I mean, like, we have to be careful though, because that's when we dive into these types of tax conversations though, we have to get specific on like, well, what do we want to change? Because it's not always the case that like a corporation not paying tax is a bad thing. For instance, like if you're taking a lot of losses, if you're reinvesting your profits or whatever, like when people are like, it's not fair that Amazon didn't pay taxes. Well, when they're not posting, you know, profit, they have a lot of revenue, but they're reinvesting. Do we want to change it so that you get taxed on your revenue, or taxed if you have like a negative like profit, if you lose money, like, because that would hurt a lot of other businesses. It's kind of hard to have those conversations. And then sometimes, again, a lot of those conversations aren't guided by fact-based tax policy analysis. It's more just like, I hate corporations and I hate Amazon and I hate Jeff Bezos. It's like, okay, well.
Yeah, and perhaps I lack the sophistication of the knowledge of that to interact with that idea, because I don't disagree in the sense that we certainly don't wish to discourage the things that generate wealth for our societies from generating wealth. And we certainly don't wish to discourage things like ingenuity. Like, you know, regardless of how I feel about Elon Musk personally, I am impressed with some of the innovations that have come out of that mind. And I think some of the innovations that have come out of that mind are extremely beneficial to a species moving forward. Things like getting off this single planet as a single planet seems to me a very laudable goal. Right? Don't get all of humanity's eggs in a single basket. Makes a lot of sense to me from a long-term perspective of looking at making the human race survive, for example.
Yeah.
So it's a mixed bag in dealing with that. So do we wish to stamp out that innovation with making it impossible to do that because the tax structure is such, if you make any amount of money, then you're penalized for that? No, of course not. But I also do wish to see the basic social kind of support networks needed, especially as times change, to be supported, and they have to be supported by funding from somewhere. And if the largest wealth producers in our society aren't contributing to that, it certainly seems to be not ideal for that society's structuring, right? So
yeah, for sure, I agree.
Yeah, okay. So it's probably the least controversial opinion ever, which I'm
I mean, it is, but the issue is then when you have to get into the weeds and you have to argue like, okay, well, what policies are changing? Because then things get like a lot hairier, right?
Yeah. So, and I don't know, like, I'm sure you do get into the weeds with this stuff for that, for discussing these. So, do you think that's moving in the right direction? Do you think that is occurring in some degree? Or do you think that, you know, when I look at things like wealth gap, when I look at things like, or hear about things like wealth gap and hear about things like the profits of some of these companies doing these things, it doesn't seem like that's moving in the right direction, right? To me.
Well, okay, now we're getting very, very, very complicated. Or not complicated, but very into the weeds. So these are more complicated. Tell me to get bored. Corporate taxes suck. I don't like corporate taxes. I don't think they're good. They're complicated to levy. They're shit. I think that
give me the 101 for why that is, and maybe like again, I have no knowledge of this whatsoever. So I'm hearing this.
Here's how I like to tax people. Okay, taxes should be relatively simple, and they should be like as razor focused as they can be. Okay, let's say that I have a company and it makes like X dollars, and I don't pay all of it out in wages or whatever. So whatever money my company makes, like why is that subject to a tax from the federal government before I pay any of it out in wages or spend it? That just seems kind of weird to me. And then also, rather than like corporate tax rates, because why tax like profits of a corporation? We should just tax it heavily or more heavily for upper earners when that's actually paid out in the form of wages. I just think that's a better, it's an easier system. It's more, but it's also more sophisticated because it's targeting like the higher earners. So like rather than like this fixation on like corporate taxes, which don't even raise that much money anyway, because corporations don't typically make a lot of money, just sit on it. It's usually paid out in wages or reinvested in the company. Just increase like the ordinary income tax or the capital gains tax. Like, because now you're actually making money from the people that are making a fuck ton of money, and you're actually making money from people that are like selling stocks and whatnot. I think that those are more important tax rates to raise rather than like corporate taxes are like a really big politically nice issue, but they're like really silly, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
But people, I know that's kind of a hot take because online, like people are like, oh yeah, corporate taxes, but it's like at the end of the day, like I don't care to tax. I don't give a fuck how much money Amazon as a corporation makes because they're reinvesting most of that anyway. What I really care is like the highest earners in that company, when they're getting paid, they should have to pay like more taxes on that. It's just an easier way to raise money, I think. Yeah.
I gotcha. So the idea being then that it's not how successful the company it's how successful the individuals who are a portion of this who are part of this company are doing compared to everybody else, essentially.
Yeah, basically.
You're looking at that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's interesting. And that's called what exactly? So again, I'm sure like for your audience who listens to this all the time, they have some fucking clue what this is. But like I don't have any of the background for this, so I'm probably sounding like a fucking moron talking about it. My apologies, but that's where I'm at for this. What is that called?
What is?
Yeah, that's capital gains.
Oh, so there's like kind of like two big taxes that you can pay. So when you get paid a wage from a job, like if you get paid, for instance, if you fill out like a W-2 and you get paid every like 2 weeks or whatever. On that, you're paying like, like you have like your federal tax brackets and your state tax brackets or whatever.
Yep.
That's like ordinary income tax, what we would call that. Let's say that you buy like a bunch of stock and you sell it and you hold on to it for at least a year and then you sell it. The income that you make, the money that you make from the appreciation of that asset, that capital asset, the gains on that capital asset, that's a capital gains tax. And those are usually much, much, much lower in terms of the taxes paid than your ordinary income taxes.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I don't know where else to go past that, in the sense of that as you said, for me anyways, it ends pretty quickly down that thought process, which just seems to be as it's structured right now. It's pretty easy to see the general disinterest in supporting the model that fucks a lot of the people on the bottom and helps a lot of the people at the top get more wealthy for that. But the flip side of that being then that you certainly don't want to discourage that shit. In the sense of you don't want to discourage innovation, don't want to discourage stuff from you don't want to discourage the production engines of a society either.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But there's like the balance is somewhere in the middle, right? The left like constantly demonizing the fuck out of like wealthy people. This ain't it. That's not what we need to do. But then the right being like, if we raise any taxes at all, nobody's gonna start any business. That's also not true as well. Like there's a lot of money to be made and shit. So yeah, I mean like the truth is somewhere in the middle of these two positions. Yeah.
Do you feel like the politicians who are in office are well versed in this and are debating those?
No, I think
I don't get that sense.
So politicians represent their constituents, and most people just don't know fucking anything about any of this shit. So they're usually arguing like culture war issues or maybe very broad economic issues like minimum wage, but.
Is that a broken portion of the system in your mind then?
No, unfortunately, I think the biggest problem with the American system is I think the American system works really, really, really well. And I think that the will of the voter, I think, is expressed pretty well throughout all parts of the system. But I think that's kind of one of the big problems because like the average voter just doesn't know that much about a lot of the more complicated, intricate tax issues.
So I run my Twitch channel and not as a non sequitur to put this, but I run it as a benevolent dictatorship. Which is, I solicit and I'm interested in viewer feedback to a point, and at a certain point, I'm no longer interested or going to act on viewer feedback. That at some point, that what I'm going to do is choose the best thing for the channel, the most interesting thing for my content, etc., whatever else, right? And part of the simplicity of that is, although I can farm out a poll or an opinion from chat, for example, I'm going to get a series of interested individuals voting for something they want, not necessarily what's best for the outcome that I'm going for, right? Be it, the most interesting content, or be it the content that I can make a living off of, or whatever else, right? If I ask any given audience of any game I'm playing what game they want me to play, it's always more of that game indefinitely, right? And even if that game is dying or whatever else, right? So, and that being, for that particular domain, democracy is not the best ruling strategy for my Twitch channel ownership, for example.
Yeah.
Does that at all scale out to a society here? Aren't we
Oh yeah,
kind
so
of
like,
stuck? Yeah.
yeah. Here's a big issue, right? Let's say that we need to expand housing in a given city district, and let's say that this is city policy, right? So let's vote to expand housing to make it better for everybody. Well, who's going to be voting? It's going to be people that own houses, who the expansion of the housing, they're going to be threatened because their property values are going to decrease, right? This is one of the big roadblocks in terms of housing policy in cities. It's because people in the cities voting for better housing policies are necessarily voting against their own interests to do so. It's a really big, it's a really difficult issue to get over when it comes to housing policies in cities. Yeah.
So what do you do with something like that? So
I don't know. That's a fucking mindfuck question.
Well, okay.
It's a really hard one. Housing is one of the most congested, fucked up issues in the United States. It's a really, unfortunately, difficult issue to tackle. There's so much red tape. Dude, for as free as the US says they are, we have so much bureaucratic red tape against shit, even more than a lot of European countries do in a lot of areas. It's unbelievable how fucking hard and expensive it is to fucking build anything in this country when it comes to infrastructure of buildings. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I'm forever glad that I did not go into a career like that, because I don't see none of these, not none of these. A lot of the problems that we seem to be facing as a society right now don't seem to have clean answers. There's no best or right answer. It's a matter of the impacts being weighed across a number of different groups. And it seems so impure, though, the route by which we come to those conclusions. Yes, I agree with democracy in the general sense of we the people should be selecting the people to represent us, but at the same time, some of these times you're like, that doesn't work. If you get, maybe a good example of this is lobbying, for example, right? If money drives election cycles, which to a large degree it does, and certain groups can push more money for it, their interests are going to be overrepresented, even if those interests aren't in the best interests of everybody. For example, I'm thinking environment. If you look at short-term gains of companies that are fucking the environment to make money, and then pushing laws that let them keep doing that via the fact they can do that, that's a pretty shitty system as a whole. Right.
Yeah. So, a lot of the takes I'm dropping here are going to be very contrary to a lot of the most popular takes. So I don't expect you to believe them offhand, and you should do your own research or whatever, of course. I think that lobbying is something that has far less effect on the system than people actually think it does. So something you said before is actually an answer that I stumbled onto that I think is absolutely true. One of the biggest problems with our democracy is I think we've ran out of all the simple problems, right? If we think about racism or sexism, should we be hanging black people on the street without trial? Probably not. That's a pretty easy thing to rally against, Should women not be allowed to have jobs? They probably should be. That's a pretty easy thing to rally against, right? But it's what should the appropriate distribution of minorities be into classes given different backgrounds, income strata, and all these other things? That's a really fucking hard question. That is incredibly, and there might not even be one right answer. And now we're at the point to where society is having to vote on these issues that are so unbelievably complicated that I think that when people want to say climate change is a really good one, right? Let's vote. We're going to take some action against climate change. Everybody wants to say, never going to happen. The lobbyists are fucking us. It's really? Let's say that we go to vote on climate change. Well, in California, here are some issues. One, we're probably going to have to tax gasoline higher to discourage people from driving, super heavy gasoline cars, right? People aren't going to like that. That's unpopular. Two, when we try to turn on solar power farms in California, unions fight against it. Fossil fuel workers don't want to see those jobs disappear. And there are necessarily less jobs running clean energy plants. So two, they're fucked there. Three, let's say that we want to start increasing or adding taxes on dirty energy. So we do carbon credits or cap and trade. That means that your energy at home is going to become more expensive. People aren't in favor of that, Four, let's say that we start banning the use of single-use plastics and we use more expensive alternatives. That means your products are going to cost more. People generally aren't okay with that, right? So there's a lot of things. I'm trying to draw the difference here. A lot of people will say I really want this thing. And it's like saying like, climate change is like saying I really want a hot bod that's super shredded, but I never want to go to the fucking gym. And I think that for a lot of the more complicated issues in the US, it's the same thing. I want to do something to fix climate change, but I'm not about to sacrifice any of my fucking lifestyle to do so. And I think
but to take that analogy, but then the politicians in the middle of that analogy are like the dating people on the dating app that are dealing with that, right? In the sense that like, why are the judges for the system, the people who are pushing that system also on the bottom level of the people most impacted by any individual decision? Do you know what I mean?
What do you mean? Can I say that again?
Yeah, so I get worried about so whenever I try to build something in my shit, I'm trying to build aligned incentives because I don't really believe that people are going to push for things that they are not that they're not incentivized to do so, right? So if a politician is incentivized to be reelected, then they're going to be pushing for the things that get them reelected.
Yeah.
And those things are inevitably, from the way that election cycle works and politics work, short term. So how do we use a system like that to do something that's a long-term solution? Because what you've just described is there's a lot of short-term things that people are not going to like, are not going to want, and not going to advocate for that are necessary to get to a long-term solution.
Well, yeah, but I mean that's the problem is voters, right? If voters don't care about long-term solutions, then what are you going to do? If a voter,
okay, but here's maybe where the psychologist comes into this, which for me is that, are we really asking people to be aware of what's best for them and because I run into two things there, right? Because I also don't want my personal agency stripped from me, and I'm well aware of the contradiction of this. But I'm also aware that, my short term of like, I want a fucking beer and a goddamn, burrito or something is not also the congruent with my longer goal of like, I wish to stay at a relative level of fitness, right? So like, why are we putting these decisions of consequence into that same sort of dilemma where the short term is we want immediate gratification in terms of jobs, not even gratification, we want immediate well-being in terms of income, well-being in terms of homes, well-being in terms of growth, etc. But at the same time, we have to plan for the longer term future, which doesn't necessarily doesn't have the same things that need to be done to get there that are useful in both the short term and the long term. So
I mean, the question, it's a critique of democracy, right? Like, it
is a critique of democracy. That's what I was going to go back to. It's exactly that, which is going back to the question I asked you earlier. Is this really the right system for what we're trying to do? Is it a system that even works for what,
Also,
spin me a story that doesn't result in disaster long term from democracy.
Well, the luck so far, and I actually can't even fucking believe this, and I might be early to say this, but honestly, it looks like it's happening with climate change. The luck is that we've just been able to technologically innovate our way out of most problems. And so we don't have to have had that as long-term focus, thankfully.
This is kind of like the Joe Rogan solution. This is the solution that Joe Rogan advocates for as well, which is this is not, and I think it's an Elon Musk thing too, right? Which is that this is not as big of a problem as it's made out to be. That we will technologically advance past this faster than this problem will rise. Essentially,
somehow that seems to have been the case with energy. It seems like we're moving in that direction. Like solar energy has it's just fallen so unimaginably fast. Nobody knew that it was going to fall as quickly as it has. The cost of this energy is insane. So there's going to be problems in terms of like getting different grid set up, storing energy and whatnot. But like green energy we are making huge strides in that. Now that's not just because of like magical technology too. Like governments have been making big investments in this as well. Governments like China and even the United States have made big investments as well, which is good. But yeah, I mean, like it isn't unconceivable that there's some huge problem in the future that is just going to be hard to solve. But I mean, I don't know. Like in a democratically,
do we need problems in the future to be inconceivably hard to solve? All we need to do is find one problem that we already have now that isn't answered by a technological solution that we're pushing for, right? Because all of that solution repeatedly says the problems of today will be met by things that we innovate in the future, as opposed to necessarily doing anything now. That's essentially to flip it back to the analogy of the like weight gain, for example. It's like, I can eat whatever I want now. I'll always be doing something in the future that will burn these calories faster, right? Like, it's that kind of mentality. Is that really where we want to be for this? Are we okay with society essentially going forward in that route? Or is this literally just the best option of all the available options out there for this?
Well, I mean, what is the alternative? Like some kind of dictatorship?
I'm asking.
I don't know. It's a hard one, right? So in some ways, I'm envious of China's government and their ability to mobilize on issues without public support. That's awesome. It gives them longevity and problems. It lets them be very forward thinking. Like, that's cool. But in other ways, I also wouldn't want to be fucking Chinese. I don't want to get thrown in prison because, either I think it's probably not cool to be, sterilizing a bunch of Uyghur people to take over their land. I probably wouldn't want to be thrown in jail for, making a Winnie the Pooh joke about my president or prime minister, whatever they call him. So yeah, I don't know. Every system has its ups and downs. I like living in democracy so far. I don't know. Maybe in the future some problem will present itself and it's like, okay, well, this doesn't work. We're time to move on.
I think California is a forerunner of problems with democracy.
Yeah, probably. This place is something else, man. People talk about like, I try not to sound too conservative, but like people talk about like, we need government funded housing. We need the government running housing and shit. It's like, dude, motherfucker, if I had an apartment by the state of California, I would be the fuck out of here quicker than any motherfucker. I would leave instantly. I would walk the fuck out of that lead. No fucking way. Do I want the state of California or the fucking LA County or whatever, like owning my apartment and I've got to call some city fucking person to get my shit fixed? Fuck that. I'd rather deal with the most slumlord, evil fucking landlord in the world, because at least I could take it to court than have to deal with like the city or the county or like the state owning my fucking apartment. That sounds like a goddamn nightmare. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are problems in statewide democracies and everything too, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I realize I offer no answers for this, and and for me it's a much intellectual thought. It's as much a mind game as it is anything else, right? Like talking through these, because it just seems to me that it doesn't seem like the system is set up by and large to incentivize long-term planning. And some of the problems we're facing seem to be long-term problems. And my expectation is these things get worse, not better, right? Like we see a lot of the short-sightedness of human nature coming out with this. I think when we look at market, right, we look at this, there's a term for this and I've forgotten what it is, but it's essentially looking at hidden costs that aren't calculated into the cost equations done for this.
Oh, like it's called an externality.
Externality. You're right. That's looking at it like this way. We don't seem very set up to deal with these types of things societally with the current setup that we have. And I don't know that there's a better solution. It might be the best of what we have available, or it might not. But it's interesting to see this with things like China becoming so prominent of a superpower, right? Like dealing with that, because are we actually seeing a battle of ideas here? Are we seeing that although this type of society that we live in now and we have been raised in and grown up in, and seems like it has been the premier superpower of the world, is this idea fundamentally flawed in a sense? Is it fundamental? Is there an Achilles heel to democracy in the fact that we devolve into short-term benefits from this election process that ignore the long-term problems? Like it seems.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah, and
I mean, you can even argue that there are some parts of our government that kind of confirm this. So, like, for instance, are you aware of do you know what the Federal Reserve is?
Probably not much more than the name, and that it has a lot to do with our money, right? Like things like
it's our central banking system basically, and it makes determinations for like monetary policy in the United States. Okay, now monetary policy is really, 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 really important, but it's also really, 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 really political. And you know what? I'm kind of happy that the Federal Reserve is privately ran. There is no government oversight, save for like the chairman is appointed. But other than that, I would not want the fucking American public voting on whether or not to raise or lower interest rates, or whether or not do we do quantitative easing in Q4? I don't want a normal fucking loser having any say in that. I'd rather leave it to the people that work at the Fed. So and we've even acknowledged in the U.S. that's why we don't vote on Fed policy. So in some ways we've even acknowledged yeah, you know what? Some of these things are a little bit too complicated to even have you guys have a decision over. And then you've got secret government projects as well, right? Like the Manhattan Project wasn't voted on by the American public, but that was undertaken in secret. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and do we perhaps need some more of those? There seems to be, and who knows? I'm sure every society at every time during their existences have had a infinite number of crises. Looking at that is, but it seems like. And who knows? But again, this might be fucking social media. It might be news hype of looking at these as they're represented now. But it seems like some of these get more and more serious. And perhaps this, again, the news cycle is particularly bad. But California seems to be getting pummeled with, weather pattern stuff, right? And we're seeing energy crisis, we're seeing environmental crisis, we're seeing, this type of shit. And you go, are we really using the best system for dealing with this? Because every time I listen to individual senators or other public figures who are also public representatives speak, I don't ever get I'm rarely left with the feeling of satisfaction that we have the best minds with the best motivations working on this.
And that's, I just had a debate earlier on something, and it was funny because another person said something very incorrect. And the problem is when you ask somebody, what is the government supposed to do, right? You can get a whole dearth of answers. There's a word I'm looking for, breadth of answers. There's a whole variety of answers that you can get from a person. The government is supposed to protect our rights. The government is supposed to make us, stronger as a people. They're supposed to blah, 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 blah. No. That's all bullshit. What the government in a democratic system is supposed to do is represent the will of the people. Nothing more and nothing less. So if your citizens are short-sighted or if they tend to vote in certain ways, that's what the government is going to do. Full stop. That's what will happen. And
yeah, but that seems really scary to live in a system for that. And it also, I don't want my well-being put out to the will of the general public, because I don't. Again, the problem with communities or organizations or groups is they're made up of people, and I don't trust people by and large. I don't trust people I don't trust random people to be looking out for me in the same way that I'm looking out for me. And the whole point of society seems to be essentially to build that surrounding where I have the best, as you put it earlier, the best chance of thriving. So I look at this and I go, is this system? And I don't have an answer to it, but it just seems to be concerning to me. And I mean, besides, keeping my head down and staying out of it kind of deal, what am I going to do from this? I'm going to be at the mercy of the decisions of this. And that's where we're at for that. And I don't really know how to justify that. I don't really know how to internally justify going, well, this doesn't seem to be working. There don't seem to be alternatives to this. And it seems to be getting worse rather than better.
I don't know if I'd say it's getting worse. It's hard to know. It's hard to tell. I do agree that at some point, it seems like something needs to change. But I don't know what the alternatives are. That's why I'm not I'll say kind of in a cynical manner, fuck democracy. Clearly this shit is broken. But I don't lean into that argument too hard because I don't have another alternative. So I'm not going to sit here and ultra critique democracy when I can't tell you, here's a better alternative. So we kind of just have to work within the framework we have unless we can figure out something better.
Do you think it will ever change in the sense of, we have a system that hypothetically allows for change, right? Adding or modifying the Constitution or changing things as they are, but it seems like in practice seems more difficult to do and rarer over time, rather than, it doesn't feel like it is adjusting as rapidly as things are changing.
Yeah, so I mean, the problem is that the system still works really well. The issue is that the system works really well. I think that we are unbelievably divided right now in this country, so we can't get anything done. But that's how the system was designed, right? I'm trying to think of how many I don't think very many European countries have a bicameral legislature. It's really hard to pass legislation in the United States, to get it through two different legislative bodies. That's a really unique thing, I think, to the way that the U.S. government legislature runs. But
let's say that we look at this objectively. We step, and I don't mean, because even who's objectively for this, but let's say that we come to the conclusion, the Twitch chat of Destiny's channel here, come to the idea that this is maybe not working perfectly and it needs some updated changes. Is there any real way that's going to happen? Aren't changes just as partisan as everything else? And isn't the likelihood of any of that going to the system changing? I mean, in the sense of
so the system can't change unless we come together or have a war to change it, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. If the system can't, if we can't pass shit because it's so partisan already, and we're basically deadlocking from a divided country, and in some sense the system works perfectly there. If the country is this divided, it makes sense why we can't reach any of these majorities to move these things around, because the country is this divided and the representative democracy is doing its job there. But doesn't that deadlock at some point? Isn't that a problem at some point when you get to the point where nothing's occurring?
Yeah, so I feel like the problem is not even tangential. I feel like the problem isn't actually related to our system of government. I feel like the problem right now is misinformation. I think that the problem is that so a long time ago, maybe an hour ago, when we were talking about morality, I told you that there are a lot of fact-based disagreements that masquerade as moral quandaries. Like people pretend that they're questions of morality, but they're not actually. They're actually disagreements of fact. I can give you a really good example of this. Do you remember, I'm sure you do, right? The whole January 6th riots?
Yes.
Yeah, so this had nothing to do with morality at all, okay? If you genuinely believed that the election was stolen, those people had every right, maybe even a patriotic obligation to be at the White House. If we truly believe that the election was stolen by the Democrats, right? But if you truly believe that the election was not stolen by the Democrats, then what the fuck? These guys are almost like coup d'etat, like terrorists, like trying to hijack the country. What the fuck is going on, right? Now, people will argue back and forth all day over the morality of whether or not these people should have been there, but it's not really a moral question, because if we have the same collection of facts that we agree on, then whether or not they should or shouldn't have been there is almost going to be ubiquitously agreed upon. And right. I think that this is
if the election was stolen, they should have been there. And
yeah,
100%. Stolen, then they shouldn't have been there.
Exactly.
And if we don't agree on that, yeah, I agree 100%. Mm-hmm. But though I would kick that up a notch, which is you almost look at the people there as dupes, right? You look at the people there as the outcome of something upstream, and if the upstream is convincing them that this is fake, and they don't, and the upstream doesn't believe that, do you believe that? And I understand you're wildly speculating here, and you can't know, and we can't answer that way. But my take from this doesn't seem to be that this was a good faith effort. It might be a good faith effort by the people there to some degree, but the larger instigators of this don't seem to be particularly good faith for that, right? And the same with a lot of
I don't know. That's a hard one. So if you would have put a gun in my head and you asked me, does Donald Trump seriously believe the election was stolen? Man, I don't know. I'm giving you a 51-49 answer.
How about the rest of the Republican leadership? Forget Donald Trump.
Well, so the problem is the rest of the Republican leadership is functioning exactly as they should, which is they're doing what they need to do to get elected. If you're curious why Republican leadership supports Trump, you need look no further than his polling numbers. As long as Trump remains...
I'm not at all curious about it. I am more and more disillusioned by that exact sentiment, right? I think I've said this before in the channel, but maybe not, right? Growing up, my dad was always fucking politicians, they're all crooked. And then I grew up hearing that to a point where I just internalized that as, this is all, not believing that at all, essentially, which was this is just what you say about politicians. And then as I get older and see it, I'm kind of yeah, this is ridiculous. And not because they're all crooked in the sense they're all cheating or whatnot, but because the system is so fucking misaligned for what it prioritizes. And then that's that is the conversation we've been having for the last hour and a half, right? Which is, if the system seems to prioritize things that are not the things that I value in a government, what the fuck are you left doing there? If the things that this to me ties back to the morality question we started with, which is, if I believe these things and build this world looking for this ideal, and the ideal is essentially helping me get through this world, and then by default then also helping other people in this society get through this world, don't the alignment of this system seem totally out of fucking whack with those goals?
I mean, not if all the voters were cooler. Right? This is obviously a big circle jerk, fucking suck ourselves off to say, but theoretically, if every voter was more similar to our mindsets, right? If they have more long-term view, they're willing to sacrifice a little, blah, 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 blah. Let's assume you could snap your fingers to do that, right? Then we probably wouldn't be shit talking the system, right? We're probably oh wow, the system is way better, right?
Sure, but again, maybe you're right. Maybe it is the self-aggrandizing element of that. But I just feel it feels like that is not happening, and the objectives we are seeing are short-sighted objectives as opposed to long-term objectives, and that although the short-term needs to be taken care of to move people forward, I don't fucking judge anyone who's I can't eat, I'm not worried at all about climate change. Yeah, I get you, bro. That makes total sense to me. But the people who can fucking eat are sitting there going well, this is a problem for another time, or we don't believe in it, or we'll ignore this shit. That to me is concerning. And
sure.
I'll leave it there. Again, we've gone down that route for a little bit.
It sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, doom and gloom. Always doom and gloom. So, what else you got? What else you thinking about?
That's all I got for now. I'm getting pretty tired. It's pretty late for me.
All right. Well, I'm glad we got to touch base. Say hi. You going to TwitchCon?
Yeah, of course. Are you going?
I'm thinking of it. I'm thinking strongly of it. I've never been to Amsterdam. I kind of want to go. And my wife can go next year, which would be fucking great. She couldn't go. I was scheduled to go. I had flights and hotels and all that stuff for last year's TwitchCon in Amsterdam, and it got canceled. So.
Oh damn. Yeah, you should go. It's probably like the most boring fucking city on earth, to be honest. But hey,
Really?
all the Twitch people, I think so, yeah, for a European city at least. But it'll be fun to go and hang out with all the people at Twitch. Cool people like me will be there. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I might have to ping you and ask you what's worth doing in that city if you've been and know.
You can walk in the red light district to see the boobs in the windows, and that's literally it. It's just the rest of the Netherlands is probably like so much more pretty. I don't know. I think Amsterdam is really boring. It's just super boring. There are like so many cool European cities, and Amsterdam is not one of them. But that's just my opinion. It depends on what you're looking for too, though. I mean, like if you want to bike around in the rain a lot and all the city looks the exact same, then Amsterdam's gonna be a really cool place for you. But yeah.
Perhaps give me the. I hear you're getting late here, so I don't want to drag this out. So give me the 2-second TLDR of what are the things that you have enjoyed in European cities that sound like not Amsterdam that missing from Amsterdam. What are these things that are worth having done that aren't there?
To be truly honest, the only thing I care about is a really good internet connection so I can play video games. Okay. Now, if I step outside a little bit more and I'm looking for cool experiences. Okay, so a couple of things that are nice are usually like there's a lot of old history and buildings and shit in Europe, right? A lot of buildings. Sometimes even like apartment complexes, they're literally older than my country, which is kind of cool, right? When you can walk down, it's like, oh,
that place. The older the building, the worse the internet connection.
Not always, but sometimes.
Okay.
But so seeing like old historical buildings are really cool. I think that the general layout of European cities and the way that they look are really nice. So there's a ton of like mixed use zoning. So every city is very walkable. There's usually lots of public transport in like every major European city, and not even all the major ones, sometimes the minor ones too. So you can get around anywhere. There's a lot of mixed public transport, which is really cool. There's like buildings and apartments everywhere. Everything looks like there's like a way that it looks that's kind of cool that for some reason a lot of Americans have like American cities, I don't know, they have like this weird soulless urban look to them all the time that can be a little bit depressing, I guess. If you care about that kind of stuff, I don't as much, but you can. Yeah, I don't know. I think that the problem with Netherlands, in my opinion, is it's like basically like if you walk down one block in the Netherlands, you've seen the entire city because every single block is going to look the exact same. You're going to feel like that guy in the fucking Flashing Lights music video when he's going through the House of Mirrors and you're looking around. It's like, where the fuck am I? Because it's just like a bunch of streets and there's like a lake, or not a lake. There's like a little waterway in the middle, and it's like, okay,
okay.
But I'm not shit talking it. It's a fun place. I mean, you can eat food and you can smoke weed if that's a really big deal to you and you've never done that before. Then you can like smoke weed at a fucking cafe or whatever. Apparently, people really like doing that. Yeah.
There's people in many states in the United States of America right now. Yeah.
To the resurrection were women. Now that doesn't strike us as remarkable at all, but it is remarkable in the day because unfortunately at that stage women's testimony was not accepted in court. So that was a very strange thing to write in a document.
Okay.
The Joe Rogan experience.
Oh no.
So the Atlantis one.
Yeah, the Rishot structure. I was wondering if you saw those videos, Joe.
Yeah, no, that was a big one that I saw because I've been fascinated by the concept of Atlantis. You know, ever since I had.
Oh really? Oh,
But its principal value to the world and its principal doctrine is we go out into the streets and beat people the fuck up. We go out and we look for violence. They say they end fights. No, they start them. I've been mazed for the Proud Boys doing absolutely nothing. They attack people who aren't doing shit. Local people in DC that they fucked up because they were on the fight and they have a fantasy that they jerk off to at night about getting in fights and knocking Antifas out. And so they look for Antifa everywhere. So I don't want to like reform the Proud Boys in any way on this show. They're a disgusting organization.
So there was a man and a woman who were attacked in the street by Antifa, and they came out in regards to that to make sure that people got back to their hotels safely.
And then they and then they made the situation 10 times worse because they just attacked random locals. I was just standing there. And they maced me. They're a fascist fight club. That's what they do. They don't like Antifa because they also do shit fucking on the streets, and that's their boogeyman that they use to go justify fucking everything up. How did burning the property of a local black church in DC help in the fight against Antifa? I don't understand that.
Oh, you mean the Black Lives Matter sign?
Yes, they burnt the property of a local black church. You don't do that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, but
wait, is that okay? Do you denounce that?
What? Denouncing burning a Black Lives Matter sign?
On their property?
On someone else's property. Oh, they didn't burn it on their property.
Yeah, they stole it and then burnt it. Which, I mean, great.
So they stole the property and burnt it. It's still their property.
Do you denounce it or not?
Do you denounce that?
Do you denounce it?
It is illegal, and I believe Enrique was.
You know what you sound like? You sound like sounds like a Democrat politician that he doesn't like so much. I understand it. Look, conservatives and black churches have a long and friendly history. I understand.
Oh, Jesus.
Jesus Christ. God damn it.
Oh, no.
Oh, we getting spicy here.
It's so we'll still do about 7 to 8 minutes for everybody to do openers on the topics and closers respectively for their
7 to 8 minutes. Okay.
So I guess for each one. Interrupting is welcome, but don't go overboard with it. The last time you can mention a topic is on the opener of the next topic. Both these topics are pretty meaty, so I think we'll get it all out of the way. The cage match is a mechanic home to the American Octagon. And Dylan thinks he's the best villain and he can steal our mechanics, but I'm even more of a villain because I can steal the whole show from Sprout, okay? I'm just kidding. I am operating in lieu of Sprout, who is unable to stream while he is deployed or whatever he's doing on his mission for our amazing country. Okay, so shout out to Sprout. Go follow him on Twitch and on Twitter. He'll be back in due time. So yeah, the cage match. Each panelist have one opportunity to call a cage match. When a cage match is called, the challenger and the challengee will have 5 minutes to talk, and only they will be allowed to speak. I will not moderate this. During this time, everything goes that isn't TOS. Following the 5 minutes of the cage match, both the challenger and the challengee will be muted for 3 minutes so the other panelists can speak. The host also has the ability to call a cage match. So that means me. So start if Chad is going crazy and wants me to call a cage.
Somebody just sent me the context. Let me listen.
Oh.
Let me listen.
That spell isn't ready yet.
Well, I mean, at this point, I feel like you see the whole joke is I'm gay, so I can't read. I only sense vibes. That's my only ability. That's my only sense. I don't have any eyes. I'm not actually looking at anything.
Wait, where's the?
Okay. This is gonna be a show.
Two topics because they're kind of broad and meaty. So, yeah. If everybody just wants to go around and introduce themselves, we'll just go from right to left. We'll start with Hans and just go over.
Yeah, sure. Hey everybody, I'm Hans, the nicest guy on Twitch, or the greatest villain, depending on what side of the drama you're on. Great to see everybody here, having a great night. I'm excited to chat with everybody, have some real conversation. I love arguing with conservatives, and there's not nearly enough of them, so I'm really, really excited for this in particular. And thank you so much for having me. Nacho, if you want to find me, you can find me at Hans of Harkir on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, all that sort of stuff. If you're concerned because my name is very similar to Haas or Infrared, just understand that I am the wider one. I am larger than him in every frame of reference. So I'm the big guy, and he's the tiny man. So everyone have a great debate. I'm really excited for this. All right.
Okay. Go ahead, Dylan Burns.
My name's Dylan Burns. While most people know the meme around veterans is that while they're deployed, people mess with their wives, I mess with their panels instead. And I stole the cage match. And I'll steal the Octagon too. I'll make Hippie to be Octagon. That'll be the next panel I do. I'm gonna do Big Brain. Hippie to be Big Brain. Hippie to be Bird Brain. Hippie to be Infrared Showdown. I'll steal all of it. I don't care. And then I'll copyright it so the original people can't even use it. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, and Dylan Blay.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Dylan Blay. Unfortunately, I have not stolen anything from anyone on this panel yet. That's soon to be changed, potentially, if I can, because I've got some pretty wild takes, so hopefully we'll get to some of those tonight, because we plan on diving into them on the second topic. Very excited to talk about that one. I guess you can find me on Spotify under my name, Dylan Blay. You can find me on YouTube under the same name, and yeah, that'll be it.
Okay, Tiberius?
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Tiberius D. I am the super nerd extraordinaire. I talk about geopolitics. I talk about sci-fi, Star Trek, Star Wars, the whole 9 yards. If you're interested in all the nerdy shit, my place might be the place for you. And if you like my stuff, I'll give you references at the end of the show.
All right. American Revolution.
Josh Ellis, also known as American Revolution 2.0. I am a constitutional nihilist and own mymilitia.com and have a YouTube channel. Ran the May 1st anti-lockdown protests and just like to talk shit to liberals.
Amazing. Talk wordy to me. Go ahead.
Hello, name's Wordy. Talk wordy to me on Discord. I'm a libertarian socialist, so basically, and prim in my brain and calm in my heart. I talk about politics. I talk about like economics. Basically, the whole goal of my entire stream is knowing I'm stupid and getting a little less stupid every single day by learning something new. I recently covered the whole Build Back Better bill thing. So basically, I'm trying to learn more things and be able to make better debates. I'll actually be debating at ANCAP on December 10th if you want to check that shit out.
Nice. Okay. Of course. Again, I'm American Nacho, obviously the most important person on this panel. All right. So the first topic is pretty broad. So I don't know if you guys want to split this up. You guys have it in text in the group chat. We can decide that. I'm just going to lump it all together because I think it all kind of ties together. So the verdicts are in on Rittenhouse and Arbery. What do we think the impact will be on the justice system, and then also on the Republican and Democrat parties generally, as well as in the upcoming midterms? How do we think this will affect the general temperature of the political environment? For example, there's still spaces like TYT claiming that the verdict was unjust and that Rittenhouse is a white supremacist, all this other stuff. And then there are Fox Newses and other pundits on the right who basically are playing Rittenhouse as a hero and encouraging other people to maybe go out and do things or protect their spaces. Left spaces seem to not really be mentioning the Arbery case. And it seems like some right-leaning pundits like Tim Pool seem to be like hesitantly questioning Arbery and the verdict, but with like a ton of qualifiers. Yeah, so that's obviously really broad. You guys can start it wherever you want. If you want to make it short, and we can just jump right into open panel. It's up to you guys, but yeah. We'll go ahead and start with we'll start backwards. We'll go with Wordy to start for opening.
Yeah, Rittenhouse, Arbery cases, the consequences, I think, are pretty fair for how the situation developed. In terms of how this is going to affect midterms, I don't think it's really going to have a significant effect. What's more than anything, it seems to be, is a lot of hubbub in terms of like getting people like riled up in terms of like the arguments on like critical race theory and how like Democrats are trying to push a socialist agenda, and it's kind of like those rhetorical flourishes, while like the Democrats are just like really bad at like optics. They're good at getting like good at like policies they propose, but they're bad at optics, right? Like all the stuff they've been proposing. We just recently passed the infrastructure bill, but the optical nightmares that come with passing those are the biggest issue more than anything. Is we basically have to be able to like sell these things so hard, and if we can get these things passed, then we're going to like probably do pretty well in the midterms. It's like a really rough, rocky road right now. I don't know what's going to happen, but yeah, like we have people like Christopher Rufo and James Lindsay who have been like organizing and pushing like scare tactics amongst like the Republican voter base, and that's kind of what is a big contributing effect we see with like the Virginia shit. Is it's that whole entire riling up the voter base more than anything.
Okay, let's start over to, let's go up to Dylan Blay.
Yeah, so I guess my takes on this are pretty moderate. I don't know what to say other than I don't really think this is going to have too much of an effect on the midterms. As far as policy goes, I pretty much agree with Wordy. Democrats pretty optically bad. Sometimes ineffective. Scare tactics get pushed from a lot of the Republican Party heads and organizers and leaders and things of that nature about things like CRT, socialism, Marxism, cultural Marxism, whatever you want to call it. Other than that, I don't have too much to say on this topic.
Okay, Dylan Burns.
So everybody said that certain things were going to happen after the Rittenhouse trial, and basically none of them happened. The first thing that I heard was that people were going to riot and burn down every city in America, and we were going to see hell on earth, and that didn't happen. And I know that if it did happen, we'd all hear about it, because if the media loves anything, it's a good riot. It's good for TV. It's good for viewership. Get the fearmonger. Arbery case, happy that those 3 fucking lynchers are going away forever. Hope they die in prison. Other than that, whether this is going to affect the midterms, I think the fact that people can predict exactly what's happening with this specific case, when the rioting hasn't really happened out of it, the media has generally moved on from the Rittenhouse case. Rittenhouse is going to be a sticking issue, probably people in the established in the right, but those are people that were never going to go to the Democrats anyway. I doubt it's going to be much of an issue in the midterms period. And I think anyone really predicting like what's going to be a big issue in the midterms right now, I think you're being a little preemptive, a little quick to the gun. Definitely when we consider that we all thought that all the factors that were going to be in 2020, right after the midterms of 2018, we didn't know what was going to happen in 2020. We thought we did, but then COVID hit. Then we got a recession. Then we had the debate about lockdowns. Then we had a debate about how fast we get the vaccine out, vaccine implementation. None of that was expected in 2018 after the midterms, or even in late 2019 when in December when we started hearing about COVID, right? And so I think right now, everybody making this prediction about this is the thing that's going to decide the midterms, or, oh, the Democrats are screwed. It's too early to be making those predictions. It's not even 2020 yet, and 2022 yet, and people are making hard predictions how the Democrats are going to get smashed. They could get smashed. That's a possibility. It is a possibility that Joe Biden's approval rating screws over the Democrats, and the gerrymandering that the Republicans are trying to attempt to do on the state level makes it though it's going to be very difficult for Democrats to win. That's certainly a possibility, but people are jumping the gun. We just got an infrastructure bill passed that is going to have a positive effect on the lives of Americans, that has an approval of the vast majority of Americans. When you talk about Joe Biden's economic policy, when it comes bit by bit by bit, when it comes to him battling the economic recession that Trump got us into, he has been passing policies that are universally basically popular. Child tax credits, the insulin cap, the direct deposits into Americans' banks, which was held back by the Republicans. Making that determination right now, I think is silly.
Okay, Tiberius D.
Yeah, so it's a cold day in hell when I agree with the left, but largely I just, 100% right with this, is that I don't think the barometer really changed with these 2 cases. A lot of people said that the right or the left, somebody was going to freak out, and no one really did. If anything, this is, I think most sides, or most people agree, outside of like crazy ass people on the internet that like to stir shit, that mostly everything fell out the way it was supposed to, and that's good. As far as what's actually going to make 2022 make or break, I'm not going to say it's callable now. I actually agree with Dylan on that. But if you're looking for what will probably make or break, it's if the Democrats pass Build Back Better. If they can pass that with any kind of scale, another $1 trillion here or there, they're probably going to win 22. But if they can't, I'm a lot more skeptical, and I'll end with that.
All right, and Hans of Harker.
Yeah, not going to try and retread anything that Dylan or Tiberius Journal said. Both cases seemed to go how they were supposed to go. One was a pretty clear case of self-defense. The other one was a pretty obvious murder of one man by 3 men. Obviously, people are going to use them for their political ends. There's a million other things that can happen between now and the midterms. They could try and repeal Roe v. Wade because the Texas shit, divorce and stuff. There's a million things that can happen. So I don't feel like this is strongly going to do anything beyond embolden people in certain internet echo chambers, right? So if we can avoid that, if we can crush that and hopefully be a little bit more reasonable. It seems like our justice system in these 2 cases seemed to do what it was supposed to do. So not saying that systemic racism doesn't exist, obviously it does. There's a lot of things we can fix in our criminal justice system, but it seems like right now the people who unlawfully killed a black man are now in prison, and a person who, however stupid he was to be there, has the right to self-defense, has been pretty much enshrined in our nation for a long time. So things seem to be happening as intended, and it's too early to tell.
Okay, and last but not least, Josh.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with pretty much everybody so far. I think the news cycle nowadays is so short that these 2 aren't really going to play any major significance in the 2022 midterms. They are going to be trotted out like pageant queens, to be put on display as needed. I mean, Rittenhouse clearly is in that realm of being a pageant queen for the right at this point, and I would tend to bet that he's going to be pulled out and paraded as needed, but that's only going to affect the base. It's not going to change any votes. So I don't think anything that's happening now is going to affect the midterms. You know, how this new variant changes things, how the economy continues to, you know, get destroyed. Those may have factors, but yeah, I don't think these two are going to have anything to do with it.
Okay, and the floor is open, and I'll be kind of maybe stepping in to try to like explain, I guess, where my thought process on this a little bit, like here and there. So I might try to like steer the conversation in a certain direction. Generally, I guess what I'm really concerned, or what was really making me, or what I liked about this topic is like how do we think that do we think this has any impact on the justice system, or could have potentially had any impact on the justice system? And then like the temperatures of the like political environment beyond like the Democratic and Republican Party larger. So the media influence on both sides and stuff like that. So
it's going to be extremely frustrating just because I assume Republicans are going to take the Kyle Rittenhouse thing and just use that as a catch-all to completely discredit anything the liberal media says. And it's going to be really fucking annoying for every left of center person in the debate space online for the next 9 months. And it's probably going to happen like in some actual Republican debates, because like the Republican zeitgeist is considerably, I'd say, more crazy than like the general like Democrat zeitgeist, which is probably considerably more moderate. So that's going to be extremely annoying, and I'm not really sure how there's a counter to that in like the media cycle. So if someone has some hopium for me on that, I would love to hear it.
I was wanting to hop in here. Dylan, I was wanting to ask you specifically as well. We can't make any hard statements. We do have to kind of work with what we're given to maybe speculate to some degree. So I was wanting to. I was
Dylan
curious
1 or
is,
Dylan 2?
Dylan, you Burns.
Oh no!
I'll just call you.
Blake. Can we call you Blake?
Okay, I'll just call you Burns. I'll call you Blake for the sake of
Okay, yeah, that'll
simplicity.
Okay.
So while we can't necessarily speculate, we can kind of point towards things where people are maybe more agitated about, which like, you know, like typically on like Republicans, they're going to vote more generally than like Democrats because like the weird demographics and whatever, and like the level of like faith in your system or something. But specifically, I was curious is like, what do you think about like maybe the relationship between like the whole agitation about things like CRT as like a rhetoric point, and then like how that maybe affects like the the voting process, I guess?
I think like critical race theory, while it's of course it's a boogeyman, right? It doesn't really have much of an effect on the local like on local level or like on the schooling of children. Obviously there's a lot of school districts in this country, but the amount of hubbub it's getting in comparison to how much of an issue it is, I think is quite silly. And I think it's really more of a specter for a different issue, which has to do with teaching about racism in schools generally, right? Because there was this poll that came out, and about 30% of the country have a very negative view of CRT, which is a lot less than most people actually would assume. And if you ask that same group of people polled, what do they think about teaching about the ongoing effects of racism in America? That same 30% came back saying no, they don't like that, right? And so it's a specter for a different conversation, which talks about racism and its ongoing legacy in public schools, right? So I think it's going to be a boogeyman the same way that like BLM is a boogeyman, right? It'll motivate a certain group of people that might have voted against the Republicans in the last election in 2020 because Trump was on the ticket, but with Trump not being on the ticket anymore, we're losing those voters. I'm a part of 21st Century Democrats, and we actually did a study recently talking about the warning about this very phenomenon, saying that we're going to lose the suburban voter possibly because Trump's not going to be on the ballot, and due to the fact that we don't have the industrial like mid to low size communities like we used to, it could mean possibly a disaster in 2022. And so I think when it comes to specifically CRT, it's basically, I think it's no different than say BLM in my opinion.
Yeah. Just to say specifically though, is like when we look at like different counties that were kind of like seeing school boards, like we saw like an influx in like school board participation, and like the whole, you know, like the whole rhetoric, it's like it's anti-white and all that bullshit. Like we see what the effects are kind of. It's just like more engagement, a lot more like conspiracism, like, oh, they're trying to deny the process, they're trying to deny us access to like what our children are being taught. And like while it's not like, you know, like it's not actually being taught, it's kind of like a lens of analysis more than anything. But we have to understand like how these boogeymans kind of get like brought up and how they kind of like drive voter bases to vote more. So like if you are concerned about like teaching, you're going to directly vote for the party that you think may like be able to like help like make sure your kids are being taught properly or whatever shit.
Yeah.
Sorry, you got to be careful in terms of like what you say, because like I just moved to Virginia. I got to see like Youngkin like win in real time, and a big part of that election wasn't so much the Democrats like kind of stayed home. Democrats are actually pretty active. I think it was the most people voted in a like gubernatorial election in Virginia like ever, like outstripping the last couple elections. It's just that Republicans increased their numbers by almost like 500,000. It was fucking nuts. So we have to be extremely careful, and I think McAuliffe like fell into this hole where of the people who voted in the election, I think it was like 20 to 25% said like education was their biggest issue, i.e. CRT, and this guy during a debate said something along the lines of like, I don't care what like parents want to teach their children. And again, I think like most people on this panel, or at least like the lefties, will say, hey, we probably should have some kind of like national curriculum or some baseline to make sure that kids like aren't taught, you know, that the earth is 6,000 years old and crazy shit like that. But you got to be like able to not fucking say that on debate when a bunch of people are fucking terrified of like what we're teaching kids in schools. So that's just like an optics, like tactical thing that you have to be careful about, because Republicans are very riled up, even like in off years, and I'm not really sure. And that can definitely like bite us in 2022, even if Biden is doing a lot of good stuff, which he obviously is. So.
Well, yeah, I think that harkens back to what we were all talking about at the very beginning, especially with me and Wordy, when we were kind of hitting home on the fact in our opening statements that, you know, modern Democrats are like really dog shit at rhetoric and really dog shit at optics in terms of, you know, like that's something I don't think that the American left, so to speak, is ever going to really have on the Republicans, because we're not like really as good of agitators, so to speak, as kind of the American right wing is.
Waste.
So this is kind of like making me like rethink of like some of the stuff that I was thinking about while I was like thinking about this topic. So with Rittenhouse being acquitted, basically it seems like to some degree like this is a big dub for Republicans, because I know, you know, by being on the right, being in these spaces, like a lot of Republicans and people on the right and conservatives generally feel that you know, Democrats were definitely vocal about coming after guns, coming after like restricting, you know, you know, making gun laws more strict, and you know, there's obviously crazy people on the internet that are saying like take them all away, and those are the voices that the right hear. So we feel that, and it seems like instead of like, obviously that's not working. Moderate Democrats are never going to go along with that. Generally, Democrats and people on the left with a head on their shoulders are not going to go for, you know, restricting gun laws. So it seems like instead of doing that, we're just going to go after anyone who exercises their Second Amendment right. And it seems like this was a perfect opportunity to crucify Rittenhouse, and then it didn't end up going the way they thought it would go. And it seems like this is a big boon for Republicans, which, as someone who's a much more moderate Republican, kind of worries me, because I don't know if I trust the Republicans that may be elected in the midterms. So that's kind of like some of the thought process that's going through my head. So.
Well, I mean, if we look at the Republicans that are running in the midterms, if I'm being completely honest, more and more of them are, what's the polite way? Fucking whack jobs, nutters, crazy, insane. You're seeing more and more people on the ticket believing in just blatant conspiracy theories, and those are the voices that are having the biggest sound on the right? We talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert. We're talking about like the Jihad Squad. Oh, I saw Ilhan Omar walk in with a backpack bomb, right? And then we see, following up, Marjorie Taylor Greene doubling down on Steve Bannon's podcast. Oh, by the way, public note about Steve Bannon, he helped console Jeffrey Epstein on how to talk to the media about how he's sex trafficking children. Just a note about the former president's one of his cabinet members. And so, personally, it's hard for me, because I do have friends of mine that I do think are rational conservatives, people who care about God and gun control, right? These are like issues that I can understand, because, you know, I grew up in a religious family, and I understand having like a lot of family members who care a lot about guns, and I'm somebody who doesn't care about gun control. But it's hard for me to see these whack jobs gain more and more influence, right? And Liz Cheney losing her position in the Republican Party, one of the most powerful people in the Republican Party, not because she took some terrible conservative stance. She voted more in line with Trump than the person who replaced her, but because she didn't buy in the lie about the election being stolen. It's hard for me to really view the Republican Party's ballot in 2022 as either And you got like two options. Possibly
ahead.
you'll have somebody who's not completely insane but still has terrible
Go ahead.
policies, or an
Go ahead,
actual
Amir.
whack job.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
like
but I get it
this is
so
like the real
much.
issue is like when we run into like electoral politics is right is like it's very much a personality game. It's like who can get the most appeal. When you have like people like Beto O'Rourke says we're going to take your guns, then like everybody loses their shit over that. But then you have like if you have like Democrats like Biden, while he was able to win, right? Like, but the problem comes is his tepid approach. While it's like it's good in terms of like getting legislative agendas through, the problem comes is how much appeal you're going to have as a person, right? You hear all the memes like Sniffy Joe, all that bullshit, and like it's really frustrating. Is like you see Democrats doing good things consistently, and then they get shit
That's
on every
tough.
single
That's
time,
true.
and it's like, come on, and it's just really frustrating.
So I would hesitate in regards to just saying like, oh, like because like Joe Biden is like say like unpopular and exciting. I think Joe Biden is about as like popular as like a Democrat can really be right now. You said like, oh, it's good for getting legislation passed. Yeah, like if we're gonna win in the midterms, I would hopefully think that's because like on the backs of like a pretty progressive agenda that we just passed. But if people say, oh, like Joe Biden wasn't popular, again, like he won the Democratic primary, he has like been able to advance like probably like, you know, it's really sad to say that this is going to be probably the biggest legislative accomplishment in like recent American history, but he's done those things. So I'm not really sure if we have a more popular guy, like people that go back and forth of whether he should even run again. Like I can't even see someone like replacing him just because right now it seems like he has the Democratic Party on lock. And if we actually replace him, unless he like dies or something, it's probably just going to show a massive level of like, you know, freaking out from the Democratic side. So Joe's kind of like the best we got right now. So
Yeah,
I'm not saying you're. I know, but like it just feels like saying like, oh, be more exciting, like buggers. Like I agree. Like, but how? Like we still got to.
Well, our political landscape is both legislation and elections, right? Like those are like the two main lines of like how you build like support. You build like people like voting for you more. Like those are the two main lines. And the problem that comes is like with Democrats is it's like the exact opposite. Republicans are great at optics. They're great at like riling up voter bases to vote more, but they're terrible at legislative agendas. While like Democrats are kind of the exact opposite. And the frustration comes is like where we may have like more consistent long-term like growth. Like we have to understand is like even if we're getting these things passed, we still see like support like decreasing for people like Joe Biden. Like we need Joe Biden because he's an incumbent at this point, you know, like incumbents typically like win more. So we need him, but we also have to understand it's like really frustrating because it's like everybody just wants to crap on him.
So confused. I basically just called the Republican Party like a group of, they're all whack jobs and nobody just trying to figure out. I don't know half the people on this panel. Who are the right wingers? Is one of them Tiberius? Like what is?
Hey, like we're building interstates like fucking crazy. We're just not working on like social spending and Build Back Better because we don't believe in that shit.
Sure, but we have also been seeing issues in terms of like trans rights and like these social issues, like we're like making sure people get like baseline level of access. And we see with like a lot of Arkansas bills, there was one like saying like people couldn't get like HRT, people couldn't compete in sports, and then we had a protest recently about like ensuring like abortion rights maintained in places. Like we can get the infrastructure passed, sure, but there's also other issues that kind of like fall at the wayside and get like pushed back against in like this whole process. It's like this, it's really frustrating is like, and especially in like a red state is like, this stuff like really matters to a lot of people, and it's just like it gets screwed over a lot, you know.
I mean, it definitely gets screwed over, if you will. But there's a level of this where how like the things that you issued or that you talked about, how many of those are actively on the Republican Party platform that they even want to deal with?
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, yeah, I mean that's the whole issue is like when we get things like infrastructure passed, and those are overwhelmingly popular, but we think of like other programs where people are like people's lives depend on these things, right? Like those things are really important. Like also the infrastructure issue is like that stuff was already in the works a long time ago. This is just like the actual end consequence, and the people who are in power at that point, like especially with like the Bella Vista highway access, those people are already doing those things. It just came as like it came to a head now. So it's less of like the legislative agenda doing it. It's more like continuing the previous policy, you know.
Well, I just forgive me if I'm wrong here, but that's usually the Republican Party doctrine. They work on state legislators. They work on getting very specific agendas. Most of the time, it's infrastructure. Most of the time, it's just tax cuts for big business. But on the other side of that is that at least from what it seems like they want to do, they tend to get it done. Not saying whether you agree with it or not, that's entirely the other category. But I mean, Jesus Christ, Texas passed one of the biggest abortion witch hunts that we've ever seen in the nation's history. It's not like these people do not get what they want.
Sure, I'm saying is in terms of like when we talk about like actual like good things for people, right? Like the problem comes is like we look at infrastructure, like on a state level you can get some infrastructure passed, but for the most part we haven't like had this much investment in an infrastructure program until like now ever, right? Like this whole argument of like they get things like infrastructure passed sometimes maybe, but it's not really consistently, especially when we're looking at like the national stage, because this is like where the midterms are focused, right? It's like primarily it's going to be the national politics. That's where we kind of have to keep our attention right now.
And can I also just say like quickly, like the idea that Republicans just get the job done. I mean, Afghanistan, Iraq, repealing Obamacare, the wall. Trump didn't fulfill 53% of his campaign promises, a lot less than President Barack Obama. And I believe like the next like 23% or 22% was compromised, and he only got like 23% done. So they do get things done. I just think like the stuff they do end up getting done are usually just like tax cuts for the extremely rich. And most of the promises like they were gonna do, like making like Mexico pay for the wall, don't ever like end up surfacing.
Yeah, so like I'm not going to defend the Trump presidency for many reasons, but the whole thing here is that one where I'm getting into is that I was looking more at like the state legislature, and is where Republicans seem to have a lot of success, particularly in municipal elections as well, in county elections. But if we're down on a national level, I'm not really impressed with either party at this point. Now, granted, I am okay, or I've said on panels many times recently that I'm actually thrilled with the Democrats because they passed the infrastructure bill, which Republicans got 80% of what they wanted out of it, and they still didn't sign off on it when Mitch McConnell negotiated the motherfucker. Like, what? Guys, this is our bill. Sign on for the damn thing.
Well,
but
I mean, sorry, if you want to.
Yeah. Anyway, just to finish out is like literally one of the biggest Republican accomplishments is that we started with a $6 billion possibly build back better, and it's been walked all the way back down to what, $230 billion of new spending, part of the whole $1.2 trillion of spending that we were going to do anyway. To a large degree, this is an absolute win for the Republican Party. They literally negotiated the Democrats down to nothing, and they weren't even on the table. Like, literally, the Democrats did this to themselves, and Republicans got almost everything they wanted. Like, I'm just pissed off that we didn't sign off on this.
Well, we have to keep in mind, like, the face of the Republican Party is basically Trump and his legacy, right? We see, like, more, like, electoral, like, candidates or, like, current elected offices like Marjorie Taylor Greene, is these people specifically, like, take his rhetoric, buy into, like, his type of messaging, and, like, take that process, and, like, we have to ultimately understand this is the face of the Republican Party, as much as we like hate to admit it or not. And like basically a lot of Republicans are just contrarian as fuck. Okay,
look, you might be right, and if you are, I hope not, because I don't like the radical right of the party. Like the MTGs of the party are absolutely fucking insane. I'm not a big fan of Trump, never fucking was. I want some more rational, moderate Republicans in the mix, right? I miss
I want unicorns, you know.
Well, I mean, the problem is that a lot of them stepped away or they stepped out, and I'm kind of hoping that
because they're going to lose. Like,
no, they might.
They're getting pushed out. Like they're getting attacked by the Trump apparatus. Like,
I know. If they do, then the party's fucked, because you're literally going to see them try to pull an actual fucking coup in 24. But if you actually have significant pushback in 22, where you have Liz Cheney say, "No, fuck you guys, I'm in for the fight," and you have a number of other moderate Republicans that are really getting pissed off with this shit, then we might actually have a fight for the Republican Party. And I hope that the moderates win, because quite frankly, this right-wing extremism shit is not okay. It's not fucking okay.
This actually ties right back in, if I can real quick, this actually ties back into exactly some of the thoughts that I was thinking whenever I was creating this topic. Is like, part of my problem,
right when it gets interesting,
like bitching about, I have the same issues. Like, I would rather have some more moderate Republicans. I don't want necessarily like a full like Trump or Republican party going on. But unfortunately, part of the reason why Rittenhouse even happened, and part of the reason why, you know, militias were being formed, and why, you know, the Proud Boys were getting so big, etc., is because the left media kind of seemed to almost like harbor this sort of like more violent aspect to their like protests and stuff. And instead of like just addressing it and being like, yeah, violence bad, don't do that shit, it just kind of happened. And then now we have ACAB, we have all these other things that are basically the media not allowing for.
Can I cage match the
there to be
moderator?
any criticism of that? What's that?
Can I cage match the moderator? Can I cage match you?
I'm gonna.
I'm trying to like.
I'm
at this
cage
point,
match. Cage match. Cage match.
Unofficial moderator. Go, Dylan. Go get him.
Look.
5 minutes.
I'm trying to keep it sort of like on.
Who's
topic.
ready to
No,
rumble?
he's cage matching you. He's cage matching you. Everyone else be quiet.
I thought. Okay, see, this is why the cage match of Dylan Burns is much better because we just let it go.
Sure. He came here and took over the whole. All right, let's go. All right, fine.
Okay, so here's a question, Mr. Moderator. You say that the left harbors the violent rioters. 94% of the left's protests are peaceful, right? The vast majority of Americans don't like violence and riots. If you ask the vast majority of people, they're going to denounce riots. But the thing is about the left, they're also going to prescribe why we have these riots, why this is happening. If you look at any time in American history where race was an issue, these riots happen. People like to pretend the civil rights movement was all cookies and cream and it was a bunch of marshmallows, and they forget about the ghetto uprisings, which were violent and people fucking died from that shit for years. For years that happened. And you want to know what? It was probably a lot more violent during the civil rights movement than it was recently. I'm actually
right, but we're talking about in a first world country, in this America, like in a 21st century America, like what reasoning is there behind going and burning down, especially private property? Like at the very least, as much as I hated the fucking 100 days of like burning the fucking federal building in Portland, at least they were attacking the right target.
Rioters,
you know what I mean? I don't condone any fucking violence, but at least then they're going after the government, not after a bunch of
Riots isn't a thing where they're like, well, we're going to burn down the CVS and it's going to bring about change, right? Rioting is a pressure valve. It's something that builds up and happens because societal woes are not addressed. This happens in every society in the world. Let me ask you a question. In Lebanon right now, the economy's fucking failing. It's in the fucking gutter and the people are rioting. Are there riots bringing about a new age of prosperity? No.
Yeah, but that's not America. That's not a
America.
Nation.
In this country,
the
majority
voice on the planet.
In this country, the majority of Americans could not afford a $400 emergency. 35,000 Americans die every year because they can't even go to the hospital because they don't have health insurance. Economic issues and race issue are intermixing to create a pressure valve, and these things are not being addressed. And in many instances, when you look at life expectancy in the United States, sometimes it's getting even worse than it was just a few years ago.
But they can be addressed through our systems. Like,
and do you not
voice and more voice here than anywhere else?
Couldn't somebody said that during the somebody?
2/3 of the country is not voting. Of course, they're not going to feel like they're being heard.
Couldn't people have said the same thing about the civil rights movement? But riots still happened.
Hey there. It's not. That's what I'm saying. This is past the civil. I'm talking about.
This is a direct extension of the civil rights movement. It is the legacy of the civil rights movement continuing to this day.
It's not. Okay. No, it's not the same. Though there's not.
Do you want to ask we can ask the family of Dr. King if there's anyone who has.
Are we still segregated?
Let's ask the family of Dr. King. I mean, if there's anyone who's going to be an authority on the civil rights movement, it's probably the family of Dr. King. What do you think their opinion on people stopping the Black Lives Matter movement is right now? Or how about we talk about all the laws on the state level?
Wait. Hold on. If that's what you think that I'm for, I'm not for stopping the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't have any problem with like.
I didn't say you were.
I'm simply pointing out that the left-wing media was definitely kind of like throwing their arm over this and like unintentionally encouraging it.
The left-wing media.
Hold on. I've heard you on your talk about how some of these like pundits on the right, like Ben Shapiro and Crowder, whatever, they don't necessarily like lie directly, but they lie by omission, and that was kind of what the Democratic Party as a whole was doing. It's not like they were openly endorsing like let's all go burn.
Look, no, the cage match. Look,
we got a couple more minutes.
I'm still going. Wait, stop. Everybody else, shut the fuck up. Okay, listen. Okay, so you just did two things. The left-wing media, that's one thing, right? And the Democrats. I understand why the Democrats are going to downplay violence because it's a talking point, and I don't like the old violence is okay. But the thing is, the media loves violence. They love it. They love it so much. They love to put their cameras in front of a riot, dude. If I put rioting on my screen and I start covering rioting, my viewers are going to stoop through the roof. Anytime I cover rioting on my stream, my viewers go through the roof. And the same thing is true for the mainstream media. They love rioting. How many times have you seen CNN or any of these other commentators talk about 94% of them are protests? This is actually an exception.
Yeah, in front of the burning car lot.
The thing is, yes, there'll be certain individual commentators commentators that'll be like, well, I will of course like to say that the majority of this is peaceful, of this specific protest. That's great. As they continue to roll on all of the violent protests, let's talk about the amount of coverage of the peaceful protests, which is 94% of them, in comparison to the violent protests. What is the coverage in comparison?
Wait, say that again. Sorry.
How much
Someone's
does the media
adding.
cover the peaceful protests in comparison to the violent protest?
Oh yeah, well it's always gonna be like the violent shit. That's what.
And
That's what they
so
want.
people
Like,
are gonna think violent, and this is what people think, that violence is just happening all the time. These protests are all violent because of how the media prioritizes the violent protests.
Okay, I agree with you, but like, if there's any amount of this, like one thing that we saw, for as much as you want to shit on Republicans, or I'm sure some of them were being theatrical about it. As soon as the 6th happened, like everybody was like, okay, yeah, that shit was fucking bad. Like that's bad. Like we shouldn't do that shit.
Yep.
And I think even previously to that, I think there were Republicans that were calling out like violence that happened at protests, like with Proud Boys and other shit like that. So the latter part of what I was trying to like get to was that I'm also not like endorsing like the Proud Boys or other organizations that are going out and being like anti-protesting this shit. Like it's just the fact of the matter that what it appears is that the Democrats are like, well, this is happening on our side, so let's just ignore this shit because we need to get Biden in office. We need to get Trump out and we need to get Biden in. So let's just ignore this for now. And then now it festers, and now you have a Democratic Party that's dealing with these more extremist like ideas, kind of like fracturing and trying to deal with that in the Biden administration. And then on the right, you have a bunch of the reverse happening now, where they're kind of like putting the arm around like some more extreme or far right groups, and it's like not an environment that. Does that make sense? Like that's.
I understand what you're trying to say. I guess my main thing is, of course, I believe anytime a Democrat sees rioting, they say, I condemn this. This is terrible. This is not in the spirit of our movement. We should continue to be peaceful, and then return to their point, right? Rioting.
They don't do that. They never do that.
They
No,
don't.
they do.
They
Ever.
do. They do that all
Bullshit.
the time.
No, they do.
They do it. Watch it. Hey.
Wait.
Wait. Let's do it right now. Let's do it right now. Right now. Everybody who's a lefty in here, raise your hand. If you're a lefty in here or you're left wing in some way. Now keep it. Now lower it if you think rioting is great and we should all go riot. Wow, look at that. And if you do the same for politicians and everything, of course they're
I saw somebody flinch.
Oh yeah, they flinched. But the thing is,
somewhat confused by the question.
Why would a politician, okay, go out there and out of nowhere just be like, yeah, actually rioting's good, rioting's base, and if you ask me about rioting, I'm not gonna say it's bad. It's literally suicide because the vast majority of Americans hate rioting for good reason.
Okay, literally do not condemn it. They do not.
They
no,
do.
literally don't.
Can I, if I look it up right now, do you think I can find the president or somebody or some Democrats condemning rioting if I go Google it right now?
Yeah, but
I bet you couldn't find that many.
I couldn't find that many? Okay, let's go look it up.
Okay.
This is.
Wait,
I'm gonna say.
we also
Isn't
have
there
to-
like isn't there like
Moderate.
countless statements of
Alright,
Biden coming out here?
I'll pull
saying he's against
moderator
it?
privileges one more time to rebut, and then I'm not doing this again, okay? Because I'm not supposed to get in here. But I had to. Nobody was stirring it up, okay? So the problem is that you do have Democrats who are basically endorsing violence too, so that kind of sucks too. Like Maxine Waters and.
Here's the question.
else, like saying
Right
that
here.
shit.
I got it.
Stupid fucker. Okay.
Joe Biden, the most influential Democrat in the country. The deadly violence we saw overnight in Portland is unacceptable. As a country, must condemn the incitement of hate and resentment that led to this deadly clash. That's a condemning of rioting.
What did he say about Kenosha?
Sounds pretty decisive against the rioting.
What did he say about Kenosha?
What did he say about Kenosha? Wait.
Yeah,
So let me ask you a question.
Stop the rioting?
He didn't say
Wait,
anything
let me
about
ask you a
Kenosha.
question.
Literally made somebody
Exactly.
edit a video.
Wait, what the fuck is that? Wait, no, that's a terrible standard.
You can
Wait,
find
let me ask you a
one
question.
thing he condemned it. It's awesome.
Let me ask you a
That's
question.
awesome.
American
Find
Rev?
one riot he
American
condemned.
Rev?
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. So, have you condemned the lynching of Arbery? Because I have yet to see you do it. Does that mean you support it? No. But if that's ridiculous to say,
You should watch my channel. I actually have.
So you condemned
Okay.
it. You did?
Yeah.
Wonderful. So do you
Okay.
think, what about
Not
the
to
other,
be
wait.
not to-
Okay, that's one. You condemned one. So if I list out every lynching that has happened in the United States in the last 10 years, can I find a
did
video?
condemning them all.
You didn't. You're just lying now. You're just being facetious. But my point is,
I am.
of course.
No, my point is, I ran the May 1st protests across at every state capital in the United States. You know why there was no violence from anybody on the right? Because we shut it down. Because we condemned it before it happened.
Literally,
And you wanna know what?
Tell me one leader of BLM who has done that. Tell me one leader of BLM.
Wait. Number one, what is a
okay?
number one? What's a leader of BLM? By the way, what do you mean by leader of BLM? What do you mean by that?
BLM org.
The organization, that's not okay. Number one, BLM is there's a movement and then there's an organization. There's a two separate.
Yeah. Blah 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 blah.
So
blah,
why
blah.
the organization though? Because that's you talk about the most.
Cage match. 1 second. Fuck this guy. Do you not understand the difference between an organization and a movement, and how BLM
hasn't?
I got it entertaining. You're welcome.
And do you guys understand that? Because you call every right-wingist a fucking a white supremacist, a militia guy.
Have we said it?
Wait.
Are you gonna attack? Are you gonna attack us?
Kate Dylan, shut the fuck up.
No.
All right. All right. Org guy, you not understand the difference. And most of the time, I would say intelligent lefties like Dylan here, like I don't know the other Dylan, and then Wordy, pretty solid people. When we say, hey, this is like a white supremacist organization, we're normally talking about the fucking Proud Boys, which is like actually also an organization. There's no Proud Boy movement. There's a Proud Boy organization. There's not a 3%er movement. There's a 3%er organization. And
no, there's not. Wrong right there. Wrong right there. There is no 3%er organization. There's the 3% Originals organization, and then there's a bunch of organizations that
So you just said that there wasn't an organization, and then immediately said there was an organization.
It's a Facebook and merchandise group. They're an LLC. They're not like any kind of organization like out there promoting anything. But they are. There are groups that actually slap 3% in their name because it's an ideology.
That slap it in their name as part of the ideology, would you not call those like organizations? If like, oh, I'm training with like a group of people to potentially.
But they're not the 3% organization.
They are.
They're part of the 3% movement.
And
they're completely unaffiliated.
And you're going to ignore the Proud Boy thing as well. Are they not an organization?
Well, I mean, I actually know how the Proud Boys are actually organized. There is one organization, and then there's a bunch of individual chapters that are completely autonomous. So they would be part of the Proud Boy movement, as you would actually lay it.
So there's an organization.
Wait, no, that's
like
not even true.
Of that organization that all get like
that are completely autonomous.
They're all completely autonomous. Every single one of them's up. There's not like a specific leader of the movement who like gives. Like,
not currently, no.
Did they change it this time? What's the current one? Or like what's
there is no current one right now. Enrique was the old one.
Right. And do you realize it's still an organization? Like if they took out the leader of it, right? It's still there. When you like, and going back to like the BLM thing, you said like you don't understand like the difference between the organization and the movement. Like the
No, I didn't say I didn't understand the difference.
Okay, so you understand.
I'm saying that the difference is nominal.
This is no, it's not nominal. The original organization is like explicitly Marxist, and it's very, very small. The actual movement is the largest civil rights movement in American history, and you had tons of liberals, some conservatives, a lot of fucking centrists that all support, and they're not fucking Marxists. They're not part of the organization. They are actually part of that movement. So when you say, oh, BLM is an organization, and then like use the organizational like Marxist shit to decry the entirety of the movement is really, really, really fucking stupid.
I mean, that isn't at all what I did. I just said blah, blah, blah.
I mean, it's about the same level of intelligence in terms of what you said. So like.
No, you used a lot more words. I didn't need to express what I had to say.
And it was blah, blah, blah?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm good.
That's what...
All right, yeah, there's about 15 seconds left anyway, so we'll end it there. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Let me unmute everybody. All right, everybody else is back.
I do want
those guys will be muted for 3 minutes.
One thing I just gotta say quick. If his standard is ridiculous, but I'll meet it anyway. Tonight, I hope that activists either stay home or hold a peaceful protest, said Lex Scott, a founder of BLM Matters Utah, in response to the violence that occurred in the city. There you go. There's a leader of the actual organization. Even though it's a ridiculous standard, I still met it.
I also want to say that we specifically have seen reports of like Proud Boys and like different like right-wing groups that have gone and agitated protests. Hell, there were reported instances of right-wing people purposely agitating protests and trying to prompt riots, and like people at the protests were saying, shut that shit down. We don't want to get fucked, okay? Like we have those reported things. So like, well, we can say the protests, the riots are bad, right? Like those aren't good, but we also have to understand they aren't entirely unprompted. Things occurred pretty consistently for different things to happen. Either the police getting more violent and aggressive, or like right-wing groups, or sometimes even like the actual people protesting, they cause riots too. But like we have to understand, like what causes riots isn't just like a bunch of people are like, we want to burn shit. Like there's usually it's a response to something. Something agitates whatever like lying tensions are in the crowd. Like this whole argument of like they're just purposely going and rioting. No, like something happens in that specific moment, causes like a ignite point, and that's like really stupid just to say like they're doing this, you know?
Yeah, also with the train Marxist shit, isn't it only like 2 of 3 co-founders of the
fuck up?
overall like organization, so to speak? Weren't those the only people that came out and said they were trained, quote unquote, Marxists? Like, I think it's safe to say that any use of that is sort of propagandizing on the part of people who have like an anti-BLM agenda. So I don't really think it's safe to say that we can come out here and call this like a completely Marxist organization or anything like that.
All
That
right,
would just
Hans.
be
Oh my god, that is
I do want to say two last things.
Why were we muted like in the first place? Like, did someone else do another cage match?
After the cage match, you get muted for 3 minutes,
Oh,
so that
okay.
everybody else can respond. Yeah.
I want to say is the 3%ers, also styled 3%ers, is are American and Canadian far-right anti-government militia. That's an organization. 2 is like we also see like my brain is like losing itself. There's something else. Come back to me whenever I get back to it. But yeah, like we understand like the organizations exist. They're often agitating different things, and we see like the frustration is like the BLM protest definitely spurred on a kind of like a lot of like right-wing groups because they like use like the riots as a means to like get agitated and be more aggressive and see like these consequences.
actually not
But
that
we also
bad.
see like this issue
Well,
wasn't
no,
just
well,
happening during the BLM protest. They've kind of been servicing slowly bit by bit. Like we see in terms of like the Charlottesville riots, like these things aren't just like all at once. They have like a foundation somewhere.
So this is a general question to the panel though, because I don't know the full lore of this. Weren't those like Proud Boys and groups like that in response to
Yes.
like other events or whatever that got out of hand? Or
I mean, you could say this. You could say the same thing about like BLM too. Isn't that just a movement that forms in response to a bunch of civil tensions rising between African American communities and disparities they face? Like, I think every movement in some capacity is reactionary.
I mean, the Proud Boys
react to some type of event that goes on, that takes place, that makes it so these organizations have to form. Like, I don't think that's a crazy
It also
thing to
says
say.
like it says the Proud Boys were founded in 2016. So all like the crazy riots and stuff that had happened in like 2020, they were founded 4 years before that. I don't think like the left was burning down cities in like the year of our Lord 2016. So if you're going to use like the left as an example as to why the Proud Boys are rising up to fight back, it seems like they kind of got here first in terms of crazy shit.
No, the Proud Boys were a response to Gavin McInnes being shut down at colleges. Up until that point, they were nothing more than a drinking club and, basically a joke. And he called them out because Antifa and other left-wing activists were shutting him down at colleges. So he called them in to be his personal security. And that was how they originally got known as the alternative to Antifa.
Did anyone else cross Antifa off of their left or right-wing propaganda words bingo chart? Or is that just me?
Well, I also do want to say you're also incorrect, American Rev. I have a friend who is like connected to the Proud Boys. Like Tiberius knows who this is, but she's communicated to me like there is some level of communication. Well, it's not as much as like it was like earlier in like the year, but like there is some still communication. They're still contacting each other to some extent.
Yeah, they are in contact with each other. I know several presidents and many people throughout the nation that are Proud Boys.
Yeah.
And they're all scumbags.
True.
I wouldn't go with all of them.
I mean,
just most of them.
Wait.
Is there the one nice guy they wheel around for the cameras? They're like, hey, this guy hasn't like attacked anyone.
I mean, if you want to
to
group BLM, we can group Proud Boys. Like, you want to do this rhetorical thing, we can do it all day, motherfucker.
Well, I believe what Hans is referring to is the token white friend.
Oh my goodness.
of the Proud Boys movement. So there's that.
The one white guy. They got one.
The one
This is
white guy.
conversation. What the hell?
Okay.
Well, everything's becoming kind of a joke.
Okay.
Everything's becoming pretty much a joke at this point because we're throwing buzzwords around. At this point. I don't know how much
What
further
is
we can go with this
who invented the
conversation.
time machine that rewinded us 18 months? Like, what the fuck?
Wait, there's a show with cage matches. Is this supposed to be productive? Like, super
I
productive?
can't
Come on.
read a meme and cream. You really think there's gonna be a productive fucking discourse?
That's place for productive discourse, okay? You're not having more productive conversations.
So the thing doesn't want productive discourse.
What do you expect?
Oh, my bad. Whenever I'm invited, I usually assume that somebody actually wants to have a real conversation. I'm sorry. Let me go fucking play with my balls for the next 30 minutes.
Okay, yeah, fine with that. So the Proud Boys.
We can have a productive conversation.
All the
We also
power
can, like,
to you,
meme and cream.
Tiberius. All the power to
We
you.
can do both.
Okay.
Stop.
Yeah, multitask, dude.
Stop. Dylan, go ahead.
So the thing is with the Proud Boys, right? So Enrique Tarrio, right, was involved in what happened on January 6th, and he was arrested for firearms charges in the Capitol, and he's been deeply involved with multiple people who stormed the Capitol, like our old Twitch friend Suspect Sushi, who stormed the Capitol, scumbag. Or we could talk about the Proud Boys that coordinated January 6th, every single point of
Jeg har
the
ikke været her.
Post broke this down. Great on a YouTube video that I suggest everybody go check out. And how they, with their headsets, would go to each other, tell them to go up to the guardrail next to the cops and charge, grab it, shove them back, and then continue until eventually they got into the building. They were deeply involved in coordinating. If you want to talk about anybody that actually planned, quote unquote, the insurrection, they would be the one organization you can actually point to and say, yes, they were involved in planning an insurrection against the United States government because they were inciting at every single point until they got inside of the Capitol and stormed it. And so if its leadership is involved in that, not to even start on Joe Biggs and how he was involved in what happened on J6, because the other guy was, I think, in jail or he was on bail or whatever because of the firearms charges. If its leadership...
Enrique was just let out and told to immediately leave the area.
Yes, Enrique. Okay, so that one. So I fail to see if its leadership are all scumbags, if they engage in street violence on the regular, and its founder was very open about his penchant for violence. I mean, it's probably true that maybe there's a grandpa or grandpa in a wheelchair who's in the organization to hand out cookies, but its principal value to the world and its principal doctrine is we go out into the streets and beat people the fuck up. We go out and we look for violence. They say they end fights. No, they start them. I've been maced for the Proud Boys doing absolutely nothing. People, the video is publicly available. Well, the Proud Boys with a bunch of other protests, they charge us. They attack people who aren't doing shit. Local people in DC that they fucked up because they were on the fight and they have a fantasy that they jerk off to at night about getting in fights and knocking Antifas out. And so they look for Antifa everywhere. So I don't want to like reform the Proud Boys in any way on this show. They're a disgusting organization.
So you completely drop out what anybody did prior to the Proud Boys being out.
So let me ask you a question. If
like
I'm
the
standing,
man and woman who were attacked in the
Someone
street.
was meeting government get into the college so they gotta stab people in the street.
To be clear,
checkmate.
Okay,
They got it.
No.
Wait. To be clear,
in December, an old couple were attacked.
Okay, that doesn't. Okay, let me be honest. That doesn't matter as an organization. And what I mean by that,
because I didn't hear anything. Okay, which means nobody on the stream heard anything. Josh, please, can you restate your point, and then Dylan Burns respond.
I said there was a man and a woman who were attacked in the street by Antifa, and they came out in regards to that to make sure that people got back to their hotels safely.
And then they did and then they made the situation 10 times worse because they just attacked random locals. I was just standing there and they maced me. I didn't do shit. The footage shows clearly. I'm standing there just watching them charge us for no fucking reason. There's one person literally with his hands in his pockets that they run up behind and sucker punch. They're a fascist fight club. That's what they do. They don't like Antifa because they also do shit fucking on the streets, and that's their boogeyman that they use to go justify fucking everything up. How did burning the property of a local black church in DC help in the fight against Antifa? I don't understand that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one?
How was the burning of a local black church of its property in DC helpful in the fight against Antifa?
Oh, you mean the Black Lives Matter sign?
Yes, they burnt the property of a local black church. You don't do that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, but
I didn't burn the building. I just burned the sign attached to the building, which was also burning the fucking building.
Wait, are you okay? Just making sure I heard what the hell he said, dude.
Wait, you're wait, is that okay? Do you denounce that?
What? Denouncing burning a Black Lives Matter sign?
On their property?
On someone else's
Oh, they
property.
didn't burn it on their property.
Yeah, they stole it and then burnt it. Which, I mean, great.
So they stole the property and burnt it. It's still their property.
Do you denounce it or not? I
Do
mean,
you denounce that?
Do you denounce it?
It is illegal. And
you know what you sound like? You sound like a sounds like a Democrat politician that he doesn't like so much.
We get in trouble for saying like the fucking BLM burning down shit, but the minute like any Proud Boys do anything, we don't denounce it. Okay.
Yeah,
I get it.
Point, it's literally just like
Tiberius, see your party,
Look,
see the
Look,
issues.
I understand it. Look, conservatives and black churches have a long and friendly history. I understand.
Oh, Jesus.
Jesus Christ. God damn it.
Oh,
no. We getting spicy here.
So let's try to maybe at the nearing the end of this topic. Let's try to come to some resolve. What the hell can we do about this shit? Because I was also live streaming in DC, and I have on live stream people coming up and throwing piss bombs at this couple, people beating the shit out of just people wearing MAGA hats. So there is equal happening on both sides, and to some degree, it seems like the kind of like it seems like religious violence. It's like it goes all the way back to the ancient text, and it doesn't really matter who started it. You just keep going back and forth because they did it too. So it's
I mean, this is like this is real easy.
No, that's incomparable. So let me like give an olive branch to the crazy guy who says like the burning a black church is fine. But specifically, right? The left and BLM, we caused a lot of fucking property damage in 2020, and that's fucking atrocious. I think every lefty here would raise their hand and condemn it, right? Pretty fucking easy. In terms of violence, like in terms of killing people, the right wing is dramatically higher. It's like been shown in virtually every analysis of American like domestic terrorism, all that stuff. That's the fucking right. Yeah. Sometimes lefties do really stupid shit and they burn buildings, and that is fucking atrocious, and that is condemnable, and every person here, I assume, will condemn it. But you fucking kill people. And when you burn buildings, you're like, well, it wasn't technically the building. We only stole it and lit it on fire, and then like everything's fine. Like, what do you?
I mean, if we're making distinctions, there's a distinction between burning a building down that somebody uses to make a living, and a sign that's stapled onto another.
You don't
sign.
think that like the people who work at that church are making a living at that church? Feels pretty fucking rude. Like I think
if they burn down that church, then your comparison would be adequate. But it's not. They took a stapled on sign off and lit it on fire. It's not the same as lighting the church on fire.
So wait, let me just say. Wait, why can't we? Okay, so the thing is, here's the thing. The first thing I'd like to say is I think to say you did this or you did, he didn't do anything as far as I know. I don't think this guy went out and just punched random people. I don't know anything he's done. The thing is, right? The history of black churches and the use of force and violence against them is very, very violent in this country. A lot of people know about Black Wall Street, but you can talk about like 1919, like black churches, and I think it was Kansas or I think it was Georgia being burnt to the ground because of like misreportings and lynchings following them of black churches.
The massacres in Arkansas.
What group did that?
What group did that? It was locals. It was 1919. Proud Boys weren't a thing yet. Gavin McInnes had yet to be.
But was there a group involved in that?
Was there a group, like a mob? I don't know if there's a specific organization. But what I'm trying to get at here is that the use of force and violence against black churches has a very scary history. And so when you start being like, I don't think it's bad to take the property of black churches and burn their property, even if you disagree with their politics, right? If I went to your home and I started taking or local churches in Alabama, and it was like one of them like said, I don't know, it was a sign that was like, hey, we like abortion, or we're gonna stop abortion, or something like believe in God. And I'm like, I hate God, and I take that and I burn it. That'd be disgusting. I'd condemn it immediately. But it seems like you can't condemn the burning of this property of a local black church in DC.
Yeah, the simple take here is just come out here and denounce it. Like, why haven't you just said, no, that's bad, we don't accept it? Every leftist on this panel has literally said fucking violence, terrible shit, okay? We don't want any of that. And you're like playing defense for people stealing other people's property and lighting it on fire. Like, I'm wrapping my head around it.
I'm saying there's a slight difference between taking a sign off and lighting it on fire away from the building so that nothing.
What about right-wing groups purposely agitating violence? For example, Sorry.
Just I wanted to get something in here. What you're doing here is you're coming out here and you're playing this rhetorical defense for this side that's politics you agree with more than ours, and you're doing this to justify it. Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. You're like, well, it's different.
No,
it's
you,
like,
you're
how about you
often
come out
saying
here?
that I-
How about
I
you
am
come
more
out
for the
here
right.
and you can? How about you come out here and you just go, fuck that. That's a bad thing. We don't do it. I want to hear you say it right now to everyone sitting here. Was that a bad idea? Was it a bad thing to do? Take that sign and burn it. So you don't think it was a bad thing?
Okay.
It was stealing and destroying personal property.
Was that a
you're
Freudian
okay with
slip?
the destruction of personal property?
Was that a Freudian slip or something?
Since he's alone here, I'll just say, I'll push back a little bit and just be like, the left was saying the same things about private businesses that were-
No. I'm gonna stop. No. I'm gonna stop you because I'm gonna answer the question that you just fucking asked. We don't go to defense for shit like this. This is our problem. We need to ostracize people like this from the Republican Party, and we need to go, hey, no, we're more sane. This is not what we represent. Fuck this shit. Destruction of property is destruction of property. I don't care if I don't agree with BLM. I'm not advocating for taking off their fucking signs and going off to burn them. Fuck that and fuck this guy.
Thank you, Tiberius, for coming out and having some sense.
Base.
I appreciate it.
I had to go.
And everybody, can we get a round of applause for Tiberius real quick for being
Åh,
a
det er
sensible?
lidt patronizing, though. Not the sub.
Whoa. So now the thing is, I just want to say that we started this topic with this guy talking about, show me one example of BLM people condemning the destruction of property, one example of the condemning of the violence and the rioting, and then we all like, hey, here's an example. Also, we condemn it. What about you? And it was like, well, I mean, I don't know. Right? It's like a weird double. It would be so easy for you to say yes, just don't burn people's property. That's literally all you need to say right now to make us like leave you alone. That's literally all you have to say.
That's what I asked you to do, and you just couldn't
would
do
shut
it.
the fuck up and let me finish my statement, I'd be happy to do it, but not one of you did.
Okay, I literally gave you an interval. I gave you an interval to do it. I gave you a second.
While interrupting me.
No, I finished. I said, you say it right now. Everybody
I'm
right
gonna
here.
sever you. Okay,
Yep,
stop.
you interrupted me to say that.
Interrupting me.
All right. Interrupting is encouraged and welcomed, but
Yeah,
I want to
absolutely.
hear what the fuck people are saying. Okay, so go ahead, Josh.
I don't need your fucking pity here.
I mean, I'm the moderator. Okay, I want to hear what the fuck's being said. People watching want to hear what's
The
being
question?
said.
Like, dude, he literally.
Okay, please.
All I was saying is there's a big difference between taking a sign off and burning a building that is actually owned by a black business owner during a BLM rally.
Okay.
Which one,
Okay, so let me say I
which one do
acknowledge.
you
I
actually
acknowledge.
think hurts the black community more?
Okay, so let me just say I acknowledge that if they burnt the whole church down, that would have been worse. Or if they went through that, or that burning down a black business is also bad and worse than just burning a sign, right? Now that I've acknowledged that, will you condemn?
Yes, I condemn it.
Okay.
That was
There we
actually
go,
going to be my
thank you.
follow-up. Yeah, you should not be stealing people's shit and destroying it. Jesus Christ.
Why did it take so long for you to say that? You were sitting there like,
Because you couldn't
if
shut
I
the hell
admit
up.
the
We
right,
let
there's
you
any
give you
violence.
Time, dude. Don't lie to me. We literally sat here for like a good 10 seconds just for you to say, and then you say, "Yep, that's okay." You literally said that. Don't
I
lie
gave
to
you
me,
an
okay?
opening
I'm not
to
fucking
say
stupid.
it. I gave you an opening to say it. Like literally, I
Yeah,
said.
after you
This is
interrupted my
12
statement,
okay,
asshole.
so I couldn't hear what was going on either. So okay, so you got what you want. Okay.
Can we get Copes in the chat? Copes.
I would like to
Oh,
say
Copes.
Merry Christmas to everyone at home.
True. Dylan Sprout said that he's glad you got to participate in the authentic cage match earlier. Kind of late, but
I mean, like,
he's happy for you.
I mean, I
That
understand.
happens nowhere else on any other panel that originated nowhere else.
Just like how like the authentic liquor experience is dying from moonshine poisoning. Yes.
Okay. Do we? I guess we want to wrap this topic up, or I mean,
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, everyone's
Um,
getting sick of this
American
shit.
Rev, do you consider how mean we've been to you on this
To,
panel better or
bring
worse than
it
burning a sign?
to what I was saying. Okay, I'll let you ask your question, and then we'll go into closing statements. I'll let you ask, and I'll let him respond, and then we'll go into closing. Okay, so to remind everyone, because we got real far off, but I thought we would, and that's why I wanted to talk about this. This was the verdicts of Rittenhouse and Arbery, and the impact it will have on the parties generally in the upcoming midterms, and the general temperature of the political environment, etc. And to bring it on home, what was on my mind was how do we maybe solve an issue like this? How do we actually bridge this gap between two sides that are obviously pretty far apart? So I'll let you ask your question, Hans, but just with that in mind, that's where we'll start in closing. So Hans, go ahead.
I was just going to ask American Rev if us all being mean to him on the panel is better or worse than stealing a sign and burning it.
Nah, I deal with real Antifa. You guys are nothing.
Cool.
Real Antifa.
Yeah, I want to say specifically in terms of. Can you repeat the question? My brain fucked.
So I was just repeating the topic, but it's more so my question at the end was basically how we bridge the gap between two sides. That are so
I'm
far
not
apart.
sure we actually can bridge the gap.
I'll just start with you, but we'll go right into closing. So we'll start with you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can bridge the gap at this point. The problem comes with these parties is the Republicans are fundamentally the face of their party. It's fucked. Unless you can utterly oust Trump from office in some beautiful rhetorical fashion or some complete reorganization of rhino Republicans and all that shit. The Republican Party seems pretty fucked. You can try to negotiate with them as much as you can. I just think the only real solution at this point is just to vote Democrat, because a sensible party more than a fucking insane loony bin. Okay, that's just how I feel.
Okay. Tiberius, go ahead.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I completely zoned out for a second there.
Well, I just recapped the topic that we actually started with, and how it will affect the general temperature, and basically, I asked though how we kind of could bridge, recognizing that these two sides, the farther wings are so far apart,
Okay, so I'll condense this into largely what's been said, because I think we all agree with the original thesis.
I can't cast that yet. That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet.
Delighted that I've got the opportunity to interview my next guest. He is one of the world's leading sleep researchers, and he's author of the absolutely
That's
What we have here is testimony from Jeffrey Epstein's personal pilot that some of the most powerful people in the world stepped on his pedophile plane, which is what we're going to call it. Okay, not the Lolita Express, because some people might not know what that means. We're just going to call it the pedophile plane. Okay, so all of these high-ranking officials stepped on the pedophile plane. Now, this person has also testified that he did not see any underage persons on board when Donald Trump was on board, when Clinton was on board, and the rest of them are on board. So none of this proves, right, that either Donald Trump or Clinton or any of these officials, Prince Andrew, engaged in pedophilia with Jeffrey Epstein, right? It does pose more questions to the depths of the relationship, Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, who is planning on running again in 2024 for anyone with more than 2 brain cells, the depths of their relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, right? It does make you ask exactly how much did they know. Of course, Bill Clinton has said he knew nothing of his terrible crimes, and we have nothing saying that he knew of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. Now, Donald Trump is a little stranger, and the reason why Donald Trump is a little stranger is for 2 reasons. The first reason is the QAnon angle, right? If we think of the people who are the most diehard Trump supporters, or the people who believe that the Clintons and Pedowood, which is what they call Hollywood, and all these people, the pedophile Democrats, are working to undermine Trump, and the God-fearing Republicans who's on a quest to fight pedophilia. These are the diehard, more cultish members of Trump's base. They support Trump in part due to the fact that they think that he was the person to take on sex trafficking and to take on the pedophiles. Even though, of course, he has multiple sexual assault allegations against him and sexual harassment. And also is close personal friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Donald Trump has tried to downplay his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, but as we've seen before, if somebody could get me the footage, I'd appreciate it. He has been at parties with Jeffrey Epstein, ogling women, saying, "Oh, look at that one. Look at that young one." Right? Previously saying to media that he knows that Jeffrey Epstein likes him young. He's been on his pedophile plane, zigzagging across the country. So, to say that Donald Trump just vaguely knew Jeffrey Epstein, or Donald Trump's attempts to downplay his relationships with Jeffrey Epstein, is nothing more than obfuscation. He's obfuscating. Much God for giving me the worst pronunciation on the planet. He's just trying to distract.
Rip.
Now, I find this particularly interesting due to that basis of support, to support him to be the person to fight a quest against the pedophiles while he was close personal friends with one of the most notorious pedophiles in history. This is also on top of the fact that Matt Gaetz, one of Donald Trump's most diehard supporters, is right now in a sex trafficking scandal because he took part in sex trafficking of an underage woman and purchased their services, quote unquote. Not that you can, of course, purchase those types of services from an underage person. That's called pedophilia. I would like to say, though, the evidence does seem to show that even after Matt Gaetz learned that this person was underage, they would then go back and buy more services from them using Venmo months later. This is on top of the fact that another one of Donald Trump's biggest supporters, Alex Jones, sent child pornography to the courts accidentally during the Sandy Hook hearings. And so you heard that right.
What?
During the Sandy Hook trials, while he's on trial for, spreading disinformation about the Sandy Hook case, that these dead children were actually crisis child actors that made Alex Jones listeners go and harass the the parents of the children who was killed at Sandy Hook. While that trial was going on, he sent them child pornography. Another strong supporter of Donald Trump. I don't even think I need to get into the Roy Moore case and the allegations there. What I'm getting at here is I'm starting to think that a lot of this quest against pedophilia, fighting against pedowood, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna take on the sex trafficking, is projection.
Projection, what the fuck?
You ever meet somebody who really hates pedophilia? And I don't just mean hates pedophilia, right? We all hate pedophilia, right? There's it's good to hate pedophilia. It's disgusting. It's disgusting to go and molest children, obviously. But there's certain people who really want to emphasize just how much they hate pedophilia, right? They're not just like, yeah, lock up pedophiles and throw away the keys. They're the type of people who's like, yeah, put me in a room with them. Give me 20 minutes. Okay, I get it, man. But give me 20 minutes. I'll burn them alive. I'll skin them. I'll gouge out their eyeballs. Okay, guys, we get it. We'll gouge out their eyeballs. We'll cut off their balls. We'll feed their genitalia back to them. We'll skewer them. We'll chop them up. We'll bury them under a volcano. Then we'll drop a nuke into the volcano. Those types of people who make it a hobby to beat their chest on this particular issue, right? which always
Kinda
makes me
sus.
think that they don't really care about helping kids. They more care about proving themselves, either to be, oh, look how much of a big man they are, or, as
Kinda
I'm starting
sus.
to think more and more, it's projection. That this pedophile quest against the evil Democrats and pedophiles in Hollywood seems to be more projection than anything else. Because Donald Trump seems to have ties to one of the most notorious pedophiles in modern history. Alex Jones seems to be in his own little child pornography scandal. Matt Gaetz is in a sex trafficking of minors scandal. Roy Moore stayed the Republican candidate while in its own pedophilia scandal. And the list just seems to keep growing. And it always seems to be the people who beat the drum the hardest on this. Not out of conviction, out of wanting to stop trafficking, but out of them more looking like they want to prove themselves to the room, you know? It's kind of like when like a college frat boy is really adamant about how not gay he is, you know? He just really wants you to know that he's not gay, and he's going to do what's necessary to tell you and show you how he's not gay. And all that really does is make me suspect that they're gay. And so the more I see these far-right nut jobs beat the drum on these conspiracy theories, the more I think, yo, you guys are a bunch of pedos? It doesn't help the fact that 8kun, right? 8chan, where, you know, QAnon was popularized, and after it kind of went off of 4chan to 8chan, the person who owns that actually also hosted servers that hosted child pornography. Meaning that the person who has the most direct ties to QAnon publicly also hosted child pornography servers. So again, when more and more of this information comes out, the more and more I think it's just projection. Anyway, let's see if we could read a little bit more about the actual trial, since I've done my little speech. The prosecution's first witness, which was the pilot, testified Monday and Tuesday about his experiences as Epstein's pilot beginning in 1991. He testified that Maxwell frequently traveled on Epstein's private jet between 1994 and 2004 and would often facilitate travel plans with Vodolsky for Epstein. Maxwell was Epstein's number 2 and was his go-to person to handle everything else that was not business-related. He described his memory of the pair's relationship as more personal than business-like, but more couple-ish than actually romantic. He didn't remember seeing them kiss or hold hands, he said. Logging the names of the passengers in Epstein's private flight was not a priority, but they tried their best to be accurate. For international flights, he had to report an accurate passenger log, he said. If he didn't know a passenger's name, he'd notate the passenger by their gender, he said. On Tuesday, he testified about his memories of minor victim 1, who prosecutors alleged met Epstein and Maxwell at the prestigious art camp where Epstein was a benefactor for years. Vodolsky testified Epstein introduced him to minor victim 1, identified as June, in the court on his plane before it took off from Palm Beach, Florida, sometime in the 1990s. He said he remembered she appeared at the time to be a mature woman with piercing powder blue eyes. However, he testified on cross-examination that he couldn't be sure she actually flew on the flight or who else was there, but Maxwell's defense questioned whether Jane ever flew on Epstein's planes. I can't visualize her sitting in the passenger compartment like I would say President Clinton. It was so long ago. Well, maybe because, you know, one is a minor and the other is the former president of the United States. You know, he was keeping track. Her true first name was noted on the flight logs for 3 flights, but he acknowledged on cross-examination that Epstein had an assistant bearing the same first name without a last name logged. He couldn't be sure who it was. When asked on cross-examination, he said he didn't know the ages of the passengers he flew, but he never thought there'd be underage girls aboard as far as he could tell. I never saw any sexual activity, no. When he asked if he's seen sex acts with underage girls, he said absolutely not. He testified he never saw sex toys, used condoms, or clothes strewn about in Epstein's planes, nor any indication sexual activity took place on the planes. Kappa. The cockpit door
Yeah,
would
I
be closed during the flight, but Epstein would
trust.
sometimes introduce his guests to him before takeoff, he testified. Epstein also invited the pilots to pass freely through the cabinets to use the restroom to get coffee during flights. He also said he wasn't instructed by anyone as to how he should interact with passengers or other staff members. He said he kept passengers' manifests and flight logs for every flight he flew and would drop off the records to Epstein's office every so often without keeping copies for himself. He'd give the records to an assistant, but not typically Maxwell. Okay, so this is just all the minor details of the cross-examination. Anyway, the main story, of course, being that Bill Clinton and Donald Trump are pretty well now, like, on the record, tied to the pedophile plane. Trump never went to the island. Stop lying. I never said he went to the island. Could you, Toronto Leaf, could you show me a clip where I said that? Where I lied about the island? All I said was that he was on the pedophile plane. That's all. All I said. I mean, and let me also bring up one last thing. And I want Geek to really include this and include the footage of this. Or I don't know if there's any footage of this. I think it's mostly just reports. You guys know Steve Bannon, right? He was in Trump's cabinet. He's now one of Donald Trump's biggest defenders. He hosts The War Room, which we're actually going to be watching some of his show later today. He had Major Taylor Greene on. It's a very strange program. But Steve Bannon, who was in Trump's cabinet, after all of this information about Jeffrey Epstein was going public, and more information was getting out, and people were paying more and more attention to Jeffrey Epstein's personal sins, we'll call them, right? To be as milquetoast as physically possible, right? Steve Bannon sat down with Jeffrey Epstein and instructed him on how to talk to the press so he could repair his image. I'm not kidding. Steve Bannon, a member of Donald Trump's cabinet, instructed Jeffrey Epstein after everyone knew this dude was doinking children, terrible stuff, on how to talk to the press to cover up his image. Look, I'm not even prepared to cover this part exactly. Steve Bannon, Jeffrey Epstein. Look, it's not like a secret. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. Steve Bannon prepped Jeffrey Epstein for CBS interview, Michael Wolff claims. It's in a book that was released recently in September. I think it was released in September. Anyway, that's enough of this. That's enough of the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. Look, I don't know what to say here besides pedophilia bad and QAnoners projecting. Also, I don't know why. One second, let's see if I got a response on this. I didn't. But this is a DBT London, is like some dialectical behavior therapy thing, right? And they talk about like mental health and the deep things of mental health and stuff. I don't know who runs this, right? And it talks about dialectical behavioral therapy. Seems like some serious stuff, right? I don't exactly understand it, right? Something in London. I don't know who did this, okay? I don't know who put this on, okay? Who made this? And who put my video about John Zerka and Anna on the DBT London page for real mental health stuff, okay? But I do gotta say, it is kind of funny, okay? I don't know who put this on here, but that is very funny.
Is Destiny a stochastic terrorist? Why not? Why isn't he?
Yes.
We have to, yes.
Yeah, wait, hold on, wait, hold on. That is exactly what I said.
You said white redneck militia dudes going down different protesters.
No.
You said they'd have your
Hold
blessing.
on. I'm not here to answer for a 15-second clip. If you want to go back and watch the video, it is painfully obvious what I'm talking about. My entire argument was that if the cops aren't going to show up, if nobody else is going to help you, if you want to defend your property, I believe you should have the right to do so. It wasn't about indiscriminately killing protesters. If you think that, you're either retarded or you only watched a 15-second clip. But that is exactly what you just said. We need some term to describe what it is. If we don't like the term stochastic terrorism, that's fine. But there has to be something in between.
It doesn't matter who's the f***ing aggressor.
It absolutely matters.
Topic 2. Stochastic terrorism is an instigation of animosity directed to a specific person or group. It is often done by political or religious thought leaders in the media towards their enemies. The hate that they generate is generalized, but as the violent rhetoric is repeated, it encourages others to act on it in unpredictable fashion. That gives the speaker plausible deniability. Does it count as stochastic terrorism to publicly spread hostile rhetoric at a person accused but not convicted of a heinous crime? Does it matter if the accused may have committed a crime of hate themselves? Is spreading misinformation about a contentious event, like the Rittenhouse trial, an example of creating a hostile environment where violence may erupt? Or is this the normal combative rhetoric that is present during a controversial, politically charged moment? And credit to our friend Doobie for coming up with this interesting question. Yeah, if you were here on Saturday, then you know where we're going with this. Stochastic terrorism is a thing that we have to deal with now in general. People have been escalating rhetoric to dangerous levels, right? And honestly, it seems like in the hope to get someone to take an action. Now we've had discussions, and this not just on this channel, fucking every channel, about the Rittenhouse trial, for instance, right? And not just that, but other situations like this, where the rhetoric escalates and maybe we dehumanize people. So is that stochastic terrorism? So let's explore that. Bougie, thank you so much for the 551 gift subs, getting us to the next level. Thank you. And everyone else has been supporting. All right, I'm going to go and opening statements for our guests. Help out the hype chain if you can. So bits and gift subs. All right, peace go.
Yeah, I'm going to ask the indulgence of the panel because I'm going to tailor my comments mostly to Destiny. And I think that, by and large, I think Destiny is a good person. I think that he's very careful about his language. And I think that, we agree on a lot, but he is absolutely at sea with his position. Now, we're having this topic in the context of him calling Vivian 3 things on the panel. He called Vivian a stochastic terrorist. He called Vivian a terrorist supporter. And he called Vivian a terrorist. Before we get into stochastic terrorism, I think it's important to know what Destiny thinks about terrorism. Destiny says that terrorism is too ambiguous, too broad, too vague, too amorphous. But Destiny uses the word terrorist. We know that because Destiny called Vivian a terrorist. Now, he says that this was just a short form for stochastic terrorist, and I didn't have that context, and that he needs to be careful. I buy that, and I accept him at good faith that that is indeed what he meant. But that means that he needs to be careful and more careful, because that's the same context and the same excuse that Vosh gives for using fascists. It's the heat of the moment, it's the heat of the panel, and that's why I get loose with my language. And so if that's the case, and I'll take it at face value that it is, he needs to be more careful about that. But Destiny also doesn't matter if he didn't mean to call Viv a terrorist. He calls other people terrorists. By calling Viv a terrorist supporter, he implicitly called Michael Reinhold a terrorist. He calls Al-Qaeda members terrorists. He calls Oklahoma City members terrorists, and he doesn't hesitate. But when I refer to January 6th and insurrectionists there, he hesitates. But why? What are the things that distinguish those actions? And there certainly are things that distinguish those actions. But Destiny hasn't given definitional criteria to distinguish why when terrorism starts and when it ends. If the word is bad, if the word is too vague, then he needs to reflect on when it is that it's okay to use it. When is it an easy case for which it makes sense to use terrorism? And when is it being used too vaguely and it's just trying to reflect the political proclivities of the speaker? Destiny says that the terrorism is too broad. And how can you apply the same word to people in Al-Qaeda and to the insurrectionists of January 6th? excuse me, how can you apply the same label of stochastic terrorist to Trump as you can apply it to Vivian? I'm assuming that something about this term stochastic terrorism has to do with your proclivity or your likelihood to induce others to commit violence. And so are you really saying on the same level, Trump and Vivian are stochastic terrorists? And if so, your criticism drops with respect to this massive gulf between the magnitude of the harms caused by either form of terrorist. Destiny, when asked what is his definition for stochastic terrorism, he said something loosely like advocating violence. Well, Trump didn't really do that explicitly, and Vivian qualified everything, and it would seem to sweep in Destiny into the very thing that he's accusing others of. Because I'm sorry to say, Destiny did make a comment about dipshit protesters. We all know that comment. He says he distinguishes it because it was justified violence in that case. Well, I'm sorry, every terrorist thinks that their violence is justified. Well, you can't distinguish it by virtue of it being legal, because what Destiny's offering is not legal. It's not legal to use deadly self-defense by and large in this country just for defense of property. So I'm sorry, if you're going to accuse the regular label of terrorism of being too broad and too vague, this stochastic terrorism definition, I mean, it's just the vaguest thing I can think of. I want to know some definitional criteria that Destiny uses for this term and why Vivian is being swept into the same thing that we're calling Trump for. In summary, Destiny uses the word terrorism, but he hesitates when it's being applied to certain groups, and he doesn't provide definitional criteria for terrorism or stochastic terrorism, and he needs to justify himself, and everyone should have a thought about that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. And that hype train is still going on. Sub, give bits, give subs, help us out. That's how we do make this happen if you're enjoying this content. All right, Fanatic, please, opening statement.